and I'm so thrilled to welcome you all officially to the Cause Marketing Summit, our 6th annual, very first virtual event. This is our 7th time doing this. Many of you have been here 5 times, 6 times, and I'm so thrilled to see you back. And there's so many new faces that I'm ready to get to know. Just a few housekeeping notes. Please join the Slack workspace to do direct messaging if you want to connect to fellow attendees. Also, you can use the chat feature to ask questions. You're able to, since this is a meeting, give reactions while people are presenting, clap, encourage them. For those of you who don't know me, I'm the founder of the Cause Marketing Summit. My name is Jennifer Ritchie. Hello, wonderful people. I have been doing this for quite some time. My background is in for-profit media world and then turned nonprofit. Most recently, I was employed at an organization called Young Survival Coalition, managing over 20 different corporate partnerships. And now I'm full-time doing the Cause Marketing Summit and Cause Consulting on the side. So welcome, everyone. I'm so thrilled you're here. Normally, this is the time of day where we would be fist pumping or shaking hands or congratulating each other for showing up. So if you could kind of give a virtual high five or fist pump or message some of the folks that you know or who you don't know and say hello. I know many of you may or may not know this, but the Cause Marketing Summit was started when I learned that I was losing my job in September of 2013. We had funding abruptly cut from some of the chronic disease prevention work that we were doing in New York City. And out of that, I learned that it's important to diversify your funding, to find alternative sources of funding, and also not to rest on any so-called, guaranteed funding. And so really, I know that many of you are in that same situation. You're facing either job loss for the first time, you're shifting, you're pivoting, you may find that you want to do something else, or or maybe you're busier than ever. I know some people who have had layoffs and now they're wearing several hats. So I know everyone is in a different space, and this is really meant to be your Cause Marketing tribe. We're here to help one another, to be real, authentic, and to connect. So thank you for joining us. Please feel free to direct message me on Slack or, like I said, chat here, and let us know if you have any questions. Huge thank you to my amazing supporters. Oberland, our presenting sponsor, has made all this possible, and also our premier platinum sponsor at Accelerist, and our media partners at For Momentum and FYI have done a tremendous job at spreading the word about this conference. I thought what better way to kick off this year's Cause Marketing Summit than talk to someone who's working on the #1 cause we're all clued into, Diana Barrett. She's the founder of Survivor Corps, and I'm excited to share this previously recorded interview with her. Hi, everyone. This is Diana Barrett. She is the founder of Survivor Corps. She is a COVID-19 survivor, one of the very first people in the United States to be diagnosed with COVID-19 in New York City. She's on the Upper West Side. And she has taken her experience and started her very own nonprofit. And what launched as what I remember as a private Facebook group has grown into this robust organization that's really helping move the needle in the world of finding a vaccine, finding ways to help with the long-term effects of COVID-19, which you're going to get into a little bit. But I'd love, Diana, if you could just introduce yourself to our Cause Marketing Summit attendees and let them know a little bit about your experience and Survivor Corps.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me here. This is amazing. And what an incredible group of people to be speaking with. So this is truly an honor. I was one of the first people in the New York area to get a positive diagnosis with COVID back in early March. And I was in isolation for 18 days in March with COVID. I never had to be hospitalized. I had what I call the Tylenol and Gatorade variety, the average kind that you get better from, or so you think. And I'll get into that in a moment. But while I was in isolation, I started to get solicitations from Mount Sinai looking for volunteers to donate their plasma, because in the plasma is the yellowish, watery part of your blood, and that's where the antibodies live. So my body did exactly what it was supposed to. It encountered a novel virus. It built these antibodies, almost like an internal hazmat suit, which then allows you to share those antibodies by donating your plasma, which is easier than giving blood. And you can actually create an immune response in another human being, which is extraordinarily, it's literally saving lives. So when I started getting the same solicitation from so many people, because I was the only person anybody knew who actually had COVID at that point and had gone public with it. And I realized that there was, they weren't going to be the only game in town for long, and there was going to be a free market that was created for plasma because there was going to be a huge demand for it. Convalescent plasma goes back to the 1890s during its use for, it was first developed for use against diphtheria, and the Nobel Prize was won for it in 1901. So it's been used, it was used during the Spanish flu, it was used during polio, it was used during Ebola, H1N1, SARS. So it has a very long history. And I realized that if I had the potential, if I was going to be one of the first people to get COVID, at that point, I was pretty sure I was going to come out of it okay because I was far enough into it, that if I came out of this, I remember just back to 10th grade biology enough to realize that I'd be coming out of this with antibodies that could save lives. And if that was the power that one person had, imagine if we could create a coalition of survivors. And so I started a group called Survivor Corps on CORPS. I named it after the Peace Corps. And I started on March 24th, and it grew exponentially, it grew like crazy. We are at well over 100,000 members right now. And we did so well with filling the pipeline of plasma to all of these research institutions that none of them ended up having to launch their own recruitment processes. None of them had to advertise because we did it all for them by creating a model of donation and raising donors up to the level of superhero, and making it a really empowering marker of, you are past this virus and now you have the ability to save lives, which is extraordinary. And it's an extraordinarily empowering message to give to somebody who's just suffered through something really quite frightening. And so by the end of April, Columbia University, where I was the first donor of convalescent plasma, I was participant number 0001. But by the end of April, we had, I think there was a 7,000 person waiting list. By May, there was a 3-month waiting list at the New York Blood Center to donate plasma. So we started partnering with the biotech companies who are creating plasma-based therapeutics, looking to create what's called a hyperimmune globulin product, which is just a fancy way of, I don't know if you have any cooking experience, but imagine taking gallons of plasma and almost making a sauce reduction from it. That could go in, that could possibly be administered as an intramuscular shot eventually, that it would, could really be the best stopgap effort until we have a globally accessible vaccine. So so we started partnering with private biotech companies, and that was really extraordinary. So we were already partnered with all the blood banks. We started partnering with the fractionators, and then we started to realize that a lot of our members were not getting better. Because I started Survivor Corps so early on in the pandemic, we have captured the real life experiences of 100,000 people. Going back, they have recorded their experiences in real time. And we realized how valuable that data was because, if you think about it, as a country, we are tracking infections, we are tracking hospitalization, and we are tracking mortality. And all of our medical data is based off of hospitalized patients. That's only a small percentage of people who get COVID. The vast majority are left to, quote unquote, recover at home with Tylenol and Gatorade like I did. and none of them are going to the doctor. So nobody goes to their general practitioner because they have COVID. So we have this absolute dearth of information on this vast population. Almost all of the data that is coming out of all the medical data, all the scientific research is all being done on hospitalized patients, because the rest of us never went to the doctor with COVID. We weren't under any medical care. Nobody goes to their general practitioner with COVID. And it's the first time in our collective experiences where we're being told, yes, you are very ill. You are really sick with something that we don't even really understand. But whatever you do, do not go to the doctor unless you literally think that you're dying. You know, if you can't breathe, go to the emergency room. But anything short of that, best of luck. Wow. And so we realized that we had no data on this vast majority of people who have had COVID. And so Survivor Corps has been in many ways the canary in the COVID coal mine from the beginning. Because we've been tracking people in real time since March 24th, we saw COVID toes a month before they hit the media. We have seen, you know, when the CDC expanded their list of symptoms from 4 to 12, we listed 98. We teamed up with Indiana University School of Medicine and just closed out a study of over 4,000 people, non-hospitalized COVID patients, which will be groundbreaking. It will be the largest study done to date. And it is patient-led research that really matches up to our core beliefs, which are, efficiency, working together, collaboration, transparency, and equity. And so we have teamed up with universities. We started a program with Columbia, a longitudinal study called Recovery Corps, which will track people over the course of years, both serologically, so according to their antibodies, and symptomatically, so tracking their symptoms as well. And with that, we matched our cohort for Recovery Corps in New York to the demographics of New York City and how it was impacted by the virus. So if 5 times the number of people who lived in the Bronx were infected than in Manhattan, then our cohort will reflect that. And one of the things that we started to see that was really startling towards the end of April was that many of our members were not recovering. And it's one thing when you see a story once and then you start to see it 10 times, but when you start to see it 100 times, you realize that you're looking at a real trend. And so there's now, thankfully, the world is paying some attention to this idea of long COVID or COVID long haulers. But Survivor Corps, we had our first national media piece on NBC Nightly News on it back on May 17th. So that gives you a sense of how long we have been shouting from the rooftops on this issue. And what's happening is that 1/3 of people who get COVID are not recovering in time. And that's according to the CDC, who, I think that we can all say is admittedly conservative in its numbers. But even if we take them, at face value, we are upwards of 6 million infections right now. And that's not even including the college campuses that have not been worked into those infection numbers. And 1/3 are not recovering. 1 out of 5 are young, healthy people with no pre-existing conditions. Now, let me add that when I say young, that's 20 to 34. I'm 46. I'm not part of the 1 in 5. I'm part of the 1 in 3. So you don't need to be an epidemiologist to do the math and realize that we are at over 2 million people who could be potentially suffering from the really catastrophic effects of COVID. So one of the many things that we have learned a lot since March. Unfortunately, our policies and guidance has not followed as quickly as the science has. But one thing that we have learned is that this is a vascular disease. It is not a respiratory disease as we initially thought. And it does not, certainly we know for sure that it does not only affect the elderly and the immunocompromised anymore. In fact, the typical long hauler is a 44-year-old woman. Wow. So more men might end up on ventilators, but it is women who are experiencing this sequelae, this after effect, these, ongoing symptoms. And when I'm talking about these are not mild things. So I consider myself extraordinarily lucky. And I was just diagnosed with post-COVID onset glaucoma 2 weeks ago. And I still consider myself on the very lucky side of things. I do have some ongoing GI issues that come and go, headaches, deep inner ear pain. I'm going to a cardiologist this afternoon to get my heart checked out to make sure that there was no scarring or any other impact from the virus. But I'm extraordinarily lucky because I have access to Mount Sinai's post-COVID care center. There's a waiting list a year long right now, and there's really no other center out there like it. We will need post-COVID care centers around the country. The things that people are experiencing post-COVID are as dramatic as COVID onset diabetes, COVID onset lupus, tachycardia, myocarditis, kidney issues, which I mentioned, severe neurological issues, hearing loss. It is impacting every single organ system, and that goes beyond the obvious pulmonary issues that you would expect. So it is something that is so insidious. I mean, we have 25-year-olds in our group who are marathon runners who are on month 6, and they have on, 150 some odd days of having a fever, or 150 days of not being able to catch their breath. Or we have people, in the prime of their lives who are writers and editors who are having issues with aphasia. They are having issues with word retrieval. How are they going to go back to work? And what happens if they, need to go out on disability, but they were never able to secure a COVID diagnostic test back in March or April because either they weren't available or they were faulty.
Right.
It is a huge, huge issue that really lays out a blueprint for what public health care could look like over the next decade or more. And that's we don't even know what the long-term impacts to our children are.
Mm-hmm. That's wonderful. I'm just stunned at how quickly you mobilized, you created this organization and really rallied around the long haulers, the long-term survivors, and people who are new to COVID and maybe just facing some of the symptoms that doctors haven't even caught on that are COVID related, that patients, when banded together, are a really powerful group of people. And so thank you really for doing this for everyone and for everyone involved in making this possible. So I guess tell me a little bit about how you started this nonprofit in such a short turnaround time. I'm so impressed, and we have lots of folks in the room. I think the theme for this year is pivoting, and I can't think of someone who's done more pivoting on these panels than you have. I mean, you went from being a professional photographer, formerly working in government, now to running your own organization, being a survivor, and really helping other survivors across the country understand their diagnosis, understand the long-term effects. And also, I think what you named is getting connected to care. I think the lack of care and capacity for testing, for tracing, for treating, that's all certainly growing, but it's certainly not where it needs to be now. I mean, my two much younger cousins, I'm in the same 1 out of 3 age group as you, but my much younger cousins went away to college, and literally within 2 weeks, 3 weeks, they're home with COVID, with their middle-aged, my aunts and uncles. And so there's no real place for them to go, no guidance on, like you said, the information is when it is dire, then go to the emergency room. And that's definitely not a long-term solution that we're looking to continue.
You should definitely tell them that they need to donate plasma and tell all of their friends to the moment they are 21 days from the onset of symptoms, because it's the youngest people who are going to have the highest chances of getting through it okay. Mm-hmm. And the closer you are to infection, the more valuable that plasma is. So they can go out and truly change the world if they can gather their friends and all those people who have been newly infected and who are not suffering and who, weeks into it and are feeling well enough to go and give plasma. Please encourage them and get all of their friends to do it as well. In addition to our Facebook group, which is open to everybody, Survivor Corps, CORPS. We have a one-stop shop, a website, survivorcorps.com, which is, as I said, it's a one-stop shop on how to give back, how you can donate plasma, how you can sign up for every scientific, medical, and academic study and trial for which you qualify. But in terms of pivoting and starting this from scratch, I think it's one of those situations that had I given it much thought, I would have sort of bowed out being like, well, I have no idea how to do that. I've never taken a public health class. The last science class I took was in high school, practically. You know,
we're a nonprofit. That's no small.
Right.
That's
Yeah, no, I was a lawyer. I did work in politics. I worked for the government. I was a photographer. I had various skills that I was able to sort of cobble together to put this thing together. But it was really, I mean, talk about building the airplane as we are flying it. I reached out to a handful of friends, and we've all been working together on it. I am proud to say that of the really 7 of us who are on the team, 6, I believe, of us are Gen X moms in our 40s and 50s. We are all dealing with our kids on the side. You know, we had very disparate backgrounds, but we were, and I was the only one of us who had COVID. But we have been in literal campaign mode since day one and just sort of figured out each thing as it came along. So, you know, I think had I realized how difficult it would be to set up as a 501c3, that would have been extremely daunting in the beginning.
Sure.
We were very lucky to actually, we got picked up by Morrison Forrester, has been doing our legal work pro bono from the beginning. Sachi and Sachi agreed to do our, you know, a PR campaign for us pro bono. We've been very lucky to sort of have the kindness of strangers behind us. And we teamed up with a company called Multiplier, which is like a sort of shell, which is a shell organization for 501c3s, for newly formed 501c3s, because for us to have established legally around the country would have taken years.
Right.
Exactly. And well, with the pandemic, yet more, because so many of the offices are closed in terms of having to file the right papers and, you know, be accepted in each state and so on. So it was easier for us to go work with a fiscal sponsor than do that on our own. And they are also able to provide the sort of back office support that we, you know, just don't have the capacity to do. You know, one of my favorite partnerships is our partnership with Boy Meets Girl, you know, Stacy's company, who designed all of our sweatshirts and t-shirts and our masks. And I have to show off the drinking mask because it's like the coolest thing ever. Okay, you gotta watch
it. Put on the OG mask, the one without the drink.
Put on the original one. I'll put on the drinking one. Okay, so looks like a normal mask, right? But gee, I'm thirsty. I sure would like some iced coffee. Ooh, look at that.
I have to take off my mask to do that.
Amazing, right? So good for back to school, so good for the kids to be able to drink from their water bottles during the day, get their temperatures checked, whatever. Anyway.
I love that. It's less fiddling with it, less taking it off, putting it on, you know.
And they're so comfortable. And I also just love working with Stacey's company because they have the same commitment to the same ideals as we do. And that's really important. We have been very lucky in that we have managed to partner with organizations really in every sphere of the COVID world, yet we continue to own ourselves. So we are able to make sure that the things that matter to us most, that we are able to hold dear to. So, you know, had I thought through all of it at the beginning, I'm not sure how I would have even begun to start. It just sort of took off so quickly. And one of the things actually, I mean, so my strategy was really for a free media strategy or earned media. That's where my background in politics was in earning media. And we certainly didn't have a penny to spend on media. I didn't have a penny to spend on anything. I had to dig into savings to buy the web domain. But, you know, it worked. I mean, I think we've been featured in well over 1,000 media pieces.
Wow.
You know, and to continue to be so, we just got Dr. Fauci to do a webinar with us on long haul COVID, which will be the first. He has acknowledged it, but it'll be the first time that he's ever spoken on the record in any length
Wow.
or any
That's
depth about
incredible.
it. So
Have
that's
you
a
spoken
huge.
with him yet, or just kind of
I'm
through?
sorry.
Have you spoken with Dr. Fauci?
No, not yet. Not yet. On October 2nd. So I'm
It's
very.
invited, right? It's for the public to see.
Exactly. It's open to everybody. Just go to survivorcore.com, sign up for our newsletter. It's on October 2nd, and we'll send out information on how to log in and watch. It's free. It's open to everybody. You can submit a question so long as you're not a member of the media, and it will all be on the record. You know, so I mean, that's an extraordinary opportunity. And then 2 days after that, I will be speaking on the National Mall in Washington, D.C., as part of the COVID National Remembrance Day, representing Survivor Corps and all of the people who are, you know, basically on the record as having survived, but are really, in truth, far from it.
Sure. Sure. Oh my gosh. Well, thank you. This has been really eye-opening. And like I said, I'm just in awe of all the work you've done in the short time frame you've done it, while I think a lot of people, you know, have felt really lost and scared. You know, you really, I can tell you, we're empowered by helping. And so thank you for doing what you do.
You're welcome. I mean, I do. I mean, I say this a lot, but I really do believe that, you know, as a nation, you know, as a globe, we are being told that the best thing that we can do is do nothing. But that truly goes against the human spirit. It's not who we are as humanity. There's something hardwired in us to want to help. And so there's nothing more therapeutic. There's nothing more hopeful than being able to, whether it's donating plasma or signing up for a study or just simply lending a kind word to another member on the Survivor Corps page, it makes us all, you know, it puts us all in a better place.
I was just curious what you want to see happen with COVID-19, where you want to see people. This is really, Cause Marketing Summit is a tribe of development, marketing, PR, social impact folks who are really charged around moving the needle around missions they really care about. And so please let us know how we can better support you and what you're doing.
Thank you. Well, we need all the support that we can get. We need to amplify our message through the entire country. We need every last, I mean, we are trying to, when I say that we are trying to mobilize an army of survivors, we are trying to mobilize an army of all of the survivors, because every voice needs to be raised. You know, there's something really beautiful about Survivor Corps, and something that I think everyone would be proud to be a part of. We are living in one, I don't think you need to hear it from me to say, you need me to hear me say it, but I think it's obvious that we are living through one of the most fractured political and social times of our lives. And I'm proud to say that Survivor Corps is a corner of the internet, a not so small corner of the internet, where over 100,000 strangers are having the most civil, supportive, compassionate conversation anywhere in America. It's truly extraordinary, and that's why I call it the epicenter of hope. And so we have a lot of work ahead of us. We have policy changes that need to be made. We have demands on healthcare that need to be made. We need medical access. We need post-COVID care centers throughout the country. We need post-COVID care centers in areas that were traditionally medically underserved. Mm-hmm. We need to look at the communities that have been most heavily impacted. And at the end of the day, there are going to be very few communities throughout the country who are spared from the effects of this. as we look ahead to the effects of long COVID, we are looking at what could potentially be the largest group of young disabled people in America ever. Wow. Even during wartime. Let that sink in. So we need policy changes. We need people to have medical access and disability insurance, regardless of whether or not they were able to get an original diagnostic test, because that was through no fault of their own that they were not distributed or they were faulty at the time. And so clinical diagnoses need to be a stand-in for a PCR test or antibody test. Not everybody comes out of this with antibodies. There are so many issues that need to be tackled, and we need to start yesterday.
Mm-hmm. Is Survivor Corps something that organizations can tell their employees and their constituents about in the event that they're affected by COVID? Is this where you would point them to go?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Please, the more that you can tell your membership, tell your people, if you have had COVID or if you know anyone who has had COVID, and at this point, just about everybody knows somebody who has had COVID, sure. This is the place to find refuge. This is a place to find answers. Normally you would say never ever go to the internet for medical advice. That's the worst idea possible. But the truth is that right now that's the only option most people have. And
everything is brand new.
And the truth is that we have a lot of clinicians in our group who are learning from members, from patients, because they realize that the patients know more than the doctors right now. And so this is not to blame the medical community at all. They have been drinking from a fire hose since last winter, but we are ready to work with them. Yeah. We are ready to work hand in hand in lockstep. And our goal needs to be to raise science back to the center of our conversations. Right now, there's a tremendous lag between policies being made, guidance being given, so that we can make proper decisions, and the actual science that we've learned. We have learned a lot in the last 6 months, but our policies don't necessarily reflect it. We have known for months, for example, that the virus is aerosolized. That, a good way to think about that is if someone, if you're outside and someone around the corner from you lights up a cigarette, you smell it. You might not see it, but you smell it. In the same way, that's how the virus passes. Right. And so once you know that, why are we having mask breaks in school? Why are we having all the children eat in the cafeteria unmasked together? Our policies, we know that only 1/3 of people present with fever with COVID. Why are we relying on temperature check? That's using yesterday's solution to solve today's problem. So it might be very effective in screening for the flu, but really not particularly effective at all for COVID. And when it comes to children, most children present with GI issues. Right. So we need to stay on top of the science and make sure that every decision that we make policy-wise is based on the most up-to-date science that we have available to us. And so, send them to our Facebook group, but also send them to our website where we have, in this effort to create an educational feedback loop, we do a regular series of webinars. Dr. Fauci will certainly be our most, a famous one, but we have an incredible series that touches, we've done with the head of the Mayo Clinic on plasma. We have done one on explaining the role of T cells and how our long-term immunity has more to do with our T cell response than the presence of antibodies and what that means. Really going and doing deep dives on all of these issues. And also, and I cannot underscore this part enough, is making sure that we are tracking the mental health aspect of this whole piece. And that goes for people who have not had COVID, who have had COVID. There is not a one of us who is not suffering from the anxiety, the tremendous anxiety that has gone along with the last 6 months of our lives. And if it isn't impacting your mental health, then you're probably not really fully paying attention to what's going on. Sure. And so we always want to keep that also at the forefront of our minds. So we have brought in a doctor who's double boarded in psychiatry and neurology to talk about how to cope with stress during COVID. And, talking a lot about immunity issues and what, if you have had COVID, should you be taking the flu shot? What are the chances of reinfection? What are when the vaccine comes out, is it something that someone who has already had COVID should take? These are the questions that need to be asked.
Mm-hmm.
And so we have just a tremendous trove of information there, from frequently asked questions explaining the difference between antibodies and antigens, and all of these things that I've had to educate myself on in the last 6 months, but it's fascinating. And the more you learn, the more fascinating it is. And
more
it
empowered
is,
you are to do something, to feel like you have some agency over what happens next.
absolutely. And there are studies that you can sign up for if you haven't had COVID.
Wow.
There are ways to contribute to science. And I think that—
And also you're taking donations, I'm sure. You need funding.
Yes, we are taking donations. So yes, any donations are very, very, very welcome.
And looking for more corporate partners. I know that you've partnered with Boy Meets Girl, but that's something you're starting to explore more of, correct?
Yes, we would love to do more. And we are a small organization. We are doing the best we can, trying to just do so many things at once, which is incredible. And we have grant money, grant requests out to foundations, some of that have already been fulfilled, others that look likely to come in. We're keeping our fingers crossed, but we would love to be able to partner with other institutions, other organizations. We have scientists reaching out to us on a daily basis, wanting to partner with us. But our goal, again, is to be partnered with everybody,
Mm-hmm.
because I really see Survivor Corps as being almost the hub of the bicycle wheel when it comes to the COVID landscape. And we are apolitical, although we are demanding changes of the government. In fact, I have a call that starts in just a few minutes with the Government Accounting Office to talk about what the disability impacts are going to be, and what kind of costs the government is going to have to anticipate with the issue of long haulers. So we need to amplify our voice as a coalition. And again, it's something that also, for anyone who has an organization that touches on women in particular, it's really a lot of women who are, 75%, it seems, of people suffering from long COVID, long haulers, are women. Mm-hmm. And something to think about that is that a lot of them are going to the doctor and they're being gaslit. They are being told that they have anxiety when they actually have tachycardia. And in a way, you can see that, you can look at it as being almost a modern day diagnosis of female hysteria. Wow. And we need to take these issues extremely seriously. And as women, we need to look out for other women and their health. And, when things come up that are syndrome-like, that doctors don't understand, it can put particularly women and minorities in precarious situations. And so we need to really do our best to advocate for everybody.
Empower them with the information. And I worked for a coalition, kind of a similar model to what you've created, and empowering folks to understand that you can ask for a second opinion. You can go to another doctor.
Exactly.
It doesn't just stop there, and, at least find someone who will listen to you and who will take you seriously. 100%. And we have reports on our 98 symptom report is, you can download it from our website, and we have patients every single day who are downloading it and taking it to their doctors, literally highlighting every single symptom that they have, and said, so how you said that this didn't have anything to do with COVID? But the most incredible thing is that we're now seeing clinicians doing the same thing. So I saw an article came out of England a couple of days ago, a doctor who was presented with a patient who looked like he had peripheral neuropathy, had potentially had COVID, but had not been able to get a diagnostic test and didn't have antibodies. But from a clinical assessment, it seemed like it, but the doctor couldn't figure out what the connection could be between COVID and peripheral neuropathy. He did an internet search. He found Survivor Corps. He found our
study that we had done with Indiana University School of Medicine. And he had an aha moment of realizing like, yes, this is due to COVID, and was able to properly diagnose his patient. So that's what we're trying to do more of, to not work against the scientific and medical community, but work with them.
Absolutely. Oh my goodness. Well, thank you, Diana. I know you have a lot of really important work to do and a very important call coming up. And so I'm just really thrilled to have
Thank
you
you
speak with
so
us.
much. Thank you so much. And you can, we've got awesome swag from Boy Meets Girl. You got to check it out. It's awesome.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. And I'll make sure your link is on our website, and that everyone, if you'd like to share your contact information, I'm happy to do that as well.
Yeah, absolutely. You can reach out to us just at hq@survivorcore.com, and it's CORPS.
Okay, perfect. Well, thank you. Have a
Thank
wonderful
you.
day.
Thank you so much.
Brittany has over 15 years of experience in cause-related marketing. She has worn many hats, both on the agency side. Most recently, she started this company called Accelerist that is really unique in its space. And it's the first SaaS platform where nonprofits and corporations can find one another and start to build partnerships, as well as many other features that she'll get into. So she's gonna be talking about what we've seen happen during this time, which industries are thriving, which are not, and your approach there. So welcome, Brittany. I hope can we hear you?
Okay, yeah, thanks for having me. Great start to the day. Hi, everybody, virtually, on the phone or on the line. It's great to see some familiar faces and read some familiar names, and also meet some new folks. So I'm really excited to be here at the Cause Marketing Summit. We have joined you guys in the past, obviously in person, but excited to be here nonetheless in this capacity. The opening speaker is a tough one to follow, so very inspiring, and hopefully we'll continue to set the stage for the rest of the day. And I'll do my best to keep it going here. So as Jen said, I am Brittany Hill, the CEO and founder of Accelerist. We are a software platform that helps companies and causes, nonprofit organizations, build partnerships with one another and improve the partnerships that they already have. We do that in a lot of different ways, whether that's through our prospecting engine that is very specific to social impact, cause-related marketing and CSR, but also pricing, packaging, helping you understand your value to one another and measuring the efficacy of those partnerships. So because we do a lot of work in the prospecting space, we've tried to keep our eye, and I say tried because gosh, you guys, I do not have all the answers. We do not have all the answers, but we've tried to keep up with the ever-changing climate that we all are living and working in, specifically when it comes to industries, as well as building partnerships in those new industries. And so first, we wanted to talk about how we actually issued a report a couple months ago, because we had the question, now that we are in a supposed recession, obviously in an unprecedented global pandemic, how does this affect profit purpose partnerships? My goodness, it's still early here Central Time, and I have my coffee. I'm going to take a sip here in a second.
Too. That's a real profit purpose partnerships.
Partnership. Thank you. We wanted to answer the question: how has previous recessions affected profit purpose partnerships, and how might this one be a little bit different? Which industries are typically thrive in recession times? How does the nonprofit sector usually become impacted? But how might this look a little different than what we're used to? And what can we prepare for, and how to better at least try to have some sort of strategy coming into the end of this year and in 2021? So a few sort of tidbits here in terms of, we took a look back historically at the economy and the previous recessions and times of crisis, and kind of looked at the State of the Union back in 2018 and previous recessions. You guys probably well know, economic growth usually contracts. This year for our economy, here's kind of what's expected. And again, this changes every day, and we'll We'll talk about some of those changes even since we've started talking about this topic over the last few weeks. But our growth is expected to contract by 6.5% in 2020. There is an expected rebound. We'll talk about what that looks like here in a second in terms of what we call the shape of recovery and why that's important to our partnerships that we build with one another. Unemployment, as you guys know, is continuing to be, prevalent. There was a huge spike, obviously, in March and April. In June, the numbers sort of declined. We're seeing it ramp back up again, unfortunately, due to PPP funding and other things sort of phasing out. Interest rates, however, though, are low. The oil and gas industry obviously has been impacted, and something that isn't talked about a lot when it comes to any recession, but in particular now, and I think our folks and friends on the West Coast and in the Gulf are expecting and experiencing this in different ways, but climate change actually also has a huge impact on recession. So extreme weather patterns obviously cause farms, utilities, other companies to declare bankruptcy, and all of that is contributing to this snowball effect that does actually contribute to an eventual financial crisis. So when we look at, overall consumer spending, which usually dictates or sometimes dictates a lot of the ways that we partner with each other across sector, obviously total consumer spending is still down about 11%. We've seen industries like obviously travel when it comes to airline, hotel, gasoline, box office down by 100%. I just saw a few that are starting to open back up, which I was really excited about. And then of course, public transit, because we're not going anywhere. So unfortunately, some of these industries are continuing to suffer. And we'll talk a little bit about how that's contributing to a different shape recovery than I think what we were anticipating coming into Q3 and Q4. While some industries are certainly hit harder, airlines, cruises, fitness, apparel, lodging, even charitable giving on that spectrum is down about 20 to 30% overall. We are seeing a lot of industries that some are typical recession-proof industries. Others are brand new to this time that we're living in. Industries like meal kits, food delivery, gaming, online grocers, video streaming. We usually and typically see things like home improvement, grocery, warehouse, clubs, discount retailers. We'll talk a little bit more about the usual suspects here in a second, but this is kind of where we are on this spectrum. Coming into this year, we also publish every year a trend report, and really kind of coming into this year, drilled down into the usual 5 categories that are the most, typically the biggest spenders when it comes to cause partnerships. First being retail. As we know, retail's been hit hard. E-commerce is now really sort of talk about a pivot. Retailers are certainly pivoting into the e-com world. Some even launching their first e-com pursuits in the last couple of weeks, I've noticed. They've never had an e-com interface, so I think that'll really be interesting to change the trajectory of Q4. Technology is seeing a heyday right now, and it's usually one of the top spenders. Professional services, things like management consulting, accounting, realtors. Pharmaceutical is certainly a changing industry. If you want to check out our trend report, we do dive into some of these industries and really try to take a look at, and it's a whole nother conversation, what's happening within each of these industries from an evolution perspective. Things like pharma, healthcare is changing with the influx of telemedicine, especially right now, telehealth. And how does that implicate or dictate how we approach partnerships? Banking, also an area that's evolving with digital banking, online banking, mobile banking. So as we kind of keep an eye on how can we build profit purpose partnerships in times of a recession, starting with industries that are thriving, that anticipate a continued spike in revenue and traction, is always a good place to start. So we thought we'd start here with those that are actually most active. When we also talk about 2020, we were all, I think, anticipating this to be a big year, but probably for different reasons. Coming into this year, we knew that corporate partnerships had really shifted, and it was on a path already that was changing the way that we build partnerships. Some have said for many years, many pundits on the line today, that we've gone from a transactional partnership base to a transformational kind of partnership where it's very integrated. We can transform the way that we build and create change together. I would venture to say that now we've moved into this environment of trailblazing. So we see, the public and private sectors really coming together and effectuating change, whether that's through social enterprise, whether that's through restricted giving and specific allocation of funds to different projects. But there are still some elements within partnerships that we need to keep an eye out for, not only in this year, and some of these have rang true this year, but moving forward. Things like innovation. Companies are consistently held to the fire to innovate, to become more efficient, especially, in this pivotal year of creating new and different ways to engage their consumers, their employees. And nonprofits, as you guys well know, I've been extremely impressed, if you're a nonprofit on the line, by the level of ingenuity and innovation that nonprofits have actually come to the table with. I think we've moved faster as an industry this year than ever before. And so this is something that I think, whether it's creating greater access for our mission-served audiences, if you're a nonprofit, through technology, whether it's developing AI solutions to actually conduct our mission when we can't do so in person, these are obvious partnership opportunities that we can bring into this new world of ours. Turnover was expected to be an issue. It's always an issue when it comes to especially social impact areas of a company. We see a lot of turnover both in nonprofits and companies, unfortunately. We obviously this year have witnessed a spike for obvious reasons. We also are seeing a lot of brands really kind of come into this year by understanding and becoming more sophisticated when it comes to taking a stand on social issues. We'll talk a little bit later about the statistics around brands that are refining what they stand for in a moment like this and defining that in a more specific and targeted way. There's continued ESG pressure. If you're not familiar with ESG requirements, ESG stands for environmental social governance. It's a way of reporting to public investors if you're a public company, and a lot of brands and companies have adopted that as a best practice in communicating how they are impacting the communities that they live and work in. So that is a pressure from leadership, and that's something that they really ask for their nonprofit partners to come to the table with and have a better understanding of how they're helping their corporate partners really impact change in those areas. In particular, against SDG goals as well, the UN Sustainable Development Goals. And then, of course, coming into this year, there was a looming recession. It's now here. So let's talk a little bit more about that. When we look back on history, just for a little sort of economy 101 here, when we look back on history, if you're familiar with recession shapes, there are a couple different kinds, Z, V, U, W, L, the alphabet of recession. The 2008, and I'm sorry, I misspoke earlier, I said 18. The 2008 recession was a W model. It was a recovery where it's sort of the worst case scenario, where there's a brief recovery period and then followed by another recession and then recovery after that. Coming into Q3, it was anticipated by the U.S. government that we were in a U-shaped recovery, where we're going to have sort of this lingering dip of economic recovery. So we're sort of in that recession. It's going to be a lull for a little bit, and then we'll spike back up, headed towards the baseline. The impact that we've seen, here are some stats as reported by a variety of different sources, Giving USA, some of our own studies, and a variety of different curated sources out there. The impact on nonprofits, typically in a recession, demand is high, resources are low, giving is typically down. It was, you can see some of the stats here in 2008. Stock market is usually a good indicator that, it typically strongly correlates to fundraising success or failure. But we're seeing differences this time around. Not all causes are created equal. Crisis typically demands for human services, sometimes international development, depending on the type of crisis. We're seeing hunger, education really be top of the list right now. So when you look at corporate giving versus individual giving versus event-based fundraising versus bequest or foundation giving, there is a little bit of a silver lining and I think an opportunity when it comes to corporate philanthropy or corporate partnerships in times of recession and recovery. So you can see back here in 2008, that lower blue or purple color bar or line represents corporate giving. So you can see where bequests, foundations all declined after that 2008-2009 year, which is shaded in the blue. You can see that declined. But on the purple, it actually rebounds. Corporate giving rebounds quicker out of that recession than others. And that's the rebound that we obviously all want to capture. Companies obviously are not immune to recessions either. Certain industries are impacted more than others. Lower demand in an economic downturn. This is an unprecedented one where we actually, even if the demand is still there, even if we need to still bank, if we need to still buy clothes, we're sort of prohibited from doing so because of the travel or social distancing restrictions. But you can see here that when it comes to industries in that typical recession-proof area, consumer staples, discount retailers, fast food, healthcare, home reno, and then other things, like what we call sin industries, things like, cigarettes, foods. But what I find really interesting is chocolate is also called and considered a sin industry. And we've seen that ring true today. We've seen stock prices and revenue of confectionery companies actually skyrocket right now. And so these are some areas that I think we typically see activity through in a recession, and we're also seeing this continue moving forward. What I find really interesting when we look at recession and why we're talking about recession so heavily impacting profit purpose partnerships is that it typically is counter-cyclical to the recession itself. So you can see here this W-shaped profit purpose trend. Actually, corporate giving typically at the time of crisis or recession, we see a big upswell initially. So you can see on the right-hand side, the orange. It then declines because corporate profits and budgets are cut immediately into that recession. But as community and independent giving stays low, there's a little bit of a rebound. Corporate America comes back on signs of hope. In the 2008 recession, it did have that second contraction that correlated to that recession and then had extreme growth and commitment to certain social issues coming out of 2008 and really started hitting its stride in 2018. Coming in out of the last recession, we actually saw a lot of opportunities and new partnerships, iconic partnerships that we've come to love and are still on the market today. Platforms like Thanks and Giving from our friends at St. Jude Children's Research Medical Center, and that is, the platform where over 60 different retailers raised typically $122 million, or they did last year in a month period. The iconic holiday Macy's and Make-A-Wish partnership where you bring a letter into Santa and raises over $1 million a year. If you guys remember the Pepsi Refresh Project, it's no longer around, but it was a great project in its heyday, awarding over $20 million to individuals, businesses, and nonprofits that had a really fresh and new idea. Our friends at Subaru and Share the Love came out of that last recession over the last 12 years. Has donated over $176 million to charities. Our friends at the MS Society of Canada started one of their flagship partnerships with A&W during the last recession. So even though these are tough times, the opportunity between profit and purpose sometimes gives us opportunities to build new and different ways of working together. Our friend Joe Waters lent us some key learnings to us from selfish giving in previous conversations that we've had. So coming out of these bad times, try to focus on those established businesses that can kind of ride it out, those Dairy Queens, the Jiffy Lubes of the world, those recession-resistant, recession-proof industries. Focus on company-led fundraisers that link consumerism to philanthropy. And that has to be strategically done right now with specific industries, obviously, that are able to execute. So moving away from maybe brick and mortar retail, focusing on e-commerce, for example. Holidays are coming up, and we see not only a lot of nonprofits but we also have seen holidays in the past really be an opportunity to have that additional boost that you need for your partnerships. Things like the Macy's Believe partnership is a great example of that, but even your IHOP National Pancake Day, kind of focusing on specific areas within an activation moment throughout the year. And even in a time in recession, and we just did another study that's coming out tomorrow on point of sale giving, and we asked consumers at point of sale, what motivates you to give right now during a recession and during a pandemic? And they said, because I have a passionate relationship and understand and have heard of this cause or charity. So brand building in these times is extremely important to maintain that stewardship and that connection with your existing donors, but then also to build new ones. So development teams work with marketing work with development. It floats all both. If you are a nonprofit in particular, and if you're a brand, you can't stand for something and shout it from the rooftops like your consumers and employees want you to without having the backing and support of your marketing and PR teams and being aligned in that way. So brand building right now is more important than ever. The big question, I think, moving forward is, will history repeat itself? If you're a fan of Mark Twain, you might know the quote, history doesn't repeat itself, but it kind of rhymes. And that's what we're seeing as we come forward into this new sort of world. I won't say new normal because I know that's a little overused, but as we come into this new recession, as we look at building partnerships moving forward, the Congressional Budget Office had predicted originally earlier this year that our recession was going to be a U recovery. So we were seeing this lull. Right? And this one's a little different because we're seeing global stimulus packages, low inflation environment. Pricing of assets are high, and so that actually gives us an opportunity because there might be some discretionary spending that companies are sitting on. However, in the last few weeks, you might have heard about the new prediction is called sort of this K-shaped recovery, which unfortunately for the longevity of our nation, of our world, is sort of a disparate, uneven recuperation period. So it creates this greater divide between the haves and the have-nots. So those that are in the upper to middle class still actually are maintaining their jobs, whereas lower wage jobs, for example, are the ones that are being cut. And so it creates this different divide of middle to low income and upper to high income households that is creating this, and I'm doing this, I hope you can see me, this K-shaped recovery.
Yeah, I just want to let you know we're a little over time, and I want to make sure people have a chance to ask a question or two. I don't know if you want to kind of quickly wrap up, and then you have questions, just drop them in the chat right now, and Brittany's gonna just wrap it up, and we'll make these slides available. I know people are asking. We'll make these slides available after the summit. I know this is a lot of really great information and a lot to digest. So thank you so much, Brittany.
Yeah, so 2 minutes, I'll wrap up. This recession is different. Nonprofits are seeing a typical response. So demand is still high, resources are low. We're seeing a lot of nonprofits diversifying the way that they build partnerships. The thing that I find is really interesting is corporations, more so than ever, have CSR budgets. They are staffed up. They are reevaluating their partnerships. They do have budgets available when it comes to impact in different ways. They've reported this, self-reported this, and they are finding new social issues to care about. If you're interested in long-term strategic planning, this is a great roadmap we can send to you after the fact of really building profit purpose partnerships in times of crisis and growth, and looking at that in various phases. So the takeaway here that I hope that you can bring from this is, let's first of all understand what's happening in the world on both sides of the aisle. Take a look at your partnerships and diversify the kinds of revenue that we're looking at, meaning from corporate budgets, from employee engagement, from marketing budgets, from consumers. Hyper-target ripe industries. Tech is having a heyday right now. healthcare is having a heyday right now and will continue to, especially in that K-shaped recovery model. So look, hyper-target ripe industries, invest in innovation right now so that you prime yourself for growth moving forward. Take a look at social enterprise opportunities. How can you effectuate change together across the industry? And then educate and train your teams internally on those trailblazing partnerships and really kind of what it takes moving forward. We'll send these slides. There's some great information in here about what are some of those ripe industries that are growing and some other examples as well. So I apologize for the delay up front, but I'm happy to answer any questions or continue the conversation in Slack.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Brittany. You always have such amazing data insights, and that was a really, like I said, chock full of information presentation. So I really appreciate you sharing it. We do have one question from Hope Friedman. She wanted to ask, what are the top 3 priorities that nonprofits can kind of take action on? I think you mentioned, focusing on those sort of tried and true businesses that aren't going anywhere, focusing on tech and health. Are there any things that you would suggest nonprofits really start to focus on more in this?
Yeah, I think it's building. Yeah, it's it's nothing new, but it's done in a different way, right? We have to build our value proposition as nonprofits. Doing that isn't just kind of creating a good way of talking about yourself. It's really figuring out, how can I bring and leverage our expertise as a nonprofit to the corporate sector, right? So how can we create a program that implicates and impacts change in the community alongside a company? How can I create virtual or in-person employee engagement opportunities as a formality and bring that to a company as our value proposition? So yeah, prospecting is huge. That's what we do is have a robust prospecting engine, finding those right industries and right timing, clearing up your value proposition and creating those innovation opportunities for partnership, and then really understanding, how to diversify how you work with partners. Those who have relied really heavily on point of sale fundraising when it comes to their partnership structure are really looking at how can we tap into various departments so that we prime ourselves for success moving forward.
Awesome. Oh my gosh, thank you. Well, Brittany's going to be on Slack, and I think she'll be available today. So if you have any questions, please direct message her or send them to us. And like I said, we'll make the presentations available after the summit. So thank you, Brittany, so much for your support over the years. You always bring such great information and insights. So
looking forward to the summit.
Thank you. So I'm really thrilled and excited to introduce our next 2 guests. Keni Thacker has been just a really wonderful resource, and he's on our volunteer advisory board. He's spoken at several of our events, and we always have a theme of inclusivity and diversity and hearing people's voices. And so it's because of Keni, people like Keni and Keisha, who really help that come forward in our events. Obviously, the events of this year are no different than other years, sadly, as it surrounds the civil rights movement. We've been talking about this for years. Our summit last year was on Juneteenth, and we really talked about the importance of representation in media and mindful messaging. So today, Keni Thacker is going to be interviewing the incredible Francilia, Wilkins, Rahim. I'm really excited to let these 2 take over the conversation and have a really meaningful interview about how we as organizations, as companies, as individuals can show up as allies in the civil rights movement in an authentic and meaningful way. So I'll let you take it away, Keni.
All right. Good morning, everyone. So good to see some faces that I do know. Hey, Jackie. Hey, Keisha. It's good to see the tribe back doing it again this year at the Cause Marketing Summit 2020. It's always a privilege and a pleasure to be here with all of you today, and just to kind of keep sharing the love, keep sharing the knowledge, and let's push forward into 2021 and beyond, just doing great things. So this conversation conversation today is a much needed conversation. I feel that we all need to first listen to everything that wonderful sister Francilia has to say today, but also not just listen, but also learn from everything that she's kind of sharing with us today. And then how do we take everything that we're listening and learning and leverage that to our different organizations to where we work? I think if we keep those 3 L's in mind throughout this entire conversation. I've been privileged enough to talk to her last week, so I know how incredibly wonderful she is and everything that she's going to bestow upon you all this morning. But it's very important that we not just listen and learn, but we also figure out ways how to take that once again into our offices, because that's so very important, because all of you here have incredible purpose, right? And you have incredible passion for the things that you do, but it's very important to put all of that into perspective and take it to where you're going. So I'm just going to start this off with a question asking about the time that we're in right now is definitely a crossroads. And where do you see the crossroads between everything that's happening in our country and the business world?
Excellent. Well, first of all, thank you all for having me. I'm so excited to be a part of this conversation today, and just so excited to be with all of the different allies in the room and advocates in the room and partners in the room as we have a much needed discussion. So I think that where we are today is an interesting place. And I think that business is the crux of it all. And why do I say that? You know, the United States has always been, we live in what's a capitalistic society. So business is the foundation of all, whether we like it or not. And I think business and equity form a crossroads. And I, have the privilege as a business owner today and someone who does, get to, have clients across the city and, both public, private, and government agencies to really understand how that crossroad impacts Black people today and people of color. So business provides the economic foundation for the world that we live in. I think business creates access on different levels. So if you see business as the highest area or the highest piece of the chain, in our society, we have a trickle-down effect. So if I am a business owner, I create jobs. I create jobs and I hire people. Depending on who I hire, those people have access. They get money. They get, ability to access different conversations and markets. And it all becomes a trickle-down effect, which lends definitely to the civil rights conversation that we're having today. So what we're seeing as a business owner, recently I partnered with a number of other business owners, commissioners across the city of New York, people, Black people, and people of color who have been in different positions and roles across the city as it pertains to supporting the economic cycle of businesses in New York. And what we've done is begin having a conversation around access and equity. Because what we've realized, just even on the city level, is that there has been initiatives like the 30% MWBE program, for example, where 30% of city contracts should be going to minority businesses. When we dug deeper down into these numbers, what we found was that of this 30%, about 0.01%, a negligible amount, not even a full 1%, are going to African-American and Black companies, right? And so what that then lends to when we talk about the trickle-down effect is that if the Black businesses are not getting business, they usually have more diverse employees and diverse, staff. And so then it impacts the community, right? And if the community is impacted and, you don't have high level jobs and, you play in diverse roles, and then your children are impacted and your children's children. So I think it's so important today that you all as business leaders really look at the economy, look at the space, the workspace that you are in, that you participate in. If you own a company, look at the diversity of your staff, look at the diversity of the clients you serve, because it all in this society is a trickle-down mechanism where if we don't have diversity at the highest, echelons and the highest levels, and if we don't have participation, we will not then have equity, we will not have, the ability for all groups to be equally yoked in this society.
I 100% agree. And the great thing that I pulled out, especially at the beginning of your answer, is how business provides access, right? It provides that access and that equity. And then I just want to tie on a little bit to that, because not only does it provide that equity and that access, but it also provides that exposure, right? That heavily needed exposure for Black and brown people and people of color, and also women businesses, right? It provides that exposure that's so very needed. But then also that experience that I think everyone kind of needs, right? So when you get that access, you're able to get into that door, or you're able to open doors and provide people to actually get a taste of what it's like to be, whatever that business is, whether it's nonprofit or it's for profit or it's government, whatever the case may be. I think those very things are so very important. And sometimes when I talk to people about diversity and things of that nature, I tell them, well, the reason why you don't have any diversity is because you have a business problem. So you really need to fix your house before you start wondering about all these other things, right?
Absolutely. I think that, just even looking at diverse office spaces, when you have diverse office spaces, by nature, you will have diverse opinions. The experiences that people of color have in this world that we live in, they're starkly different than the experiences of other folk. It's just a very different experience. I talk about, and I'll quickly say this just to be mindful of time, but I started a firm about 10 years ago, and diversity is a pillar of not only our staffing, but the work that we do across, New York. One of the biggest I talk about, even though, I have a husband, Harvard graduate, Columbia graduate, I've started a company, we've done all of the things right. We still worry every single day, my husband, about how he walks out of the house, what he's wearing, how he looks like, how he's presenting himself. There's this level of, you have to be excellent and strive to be the best at all times, because even your best is not good enough. And so I think that there is, understanding that the experience of people of color is very different. I don't care what level you are in. There's not a single, and I say I have friends of all different races, socioeconomic backgrounds. There's not a single African-American, Black, or person of color that is in my circle that will not tell you that they're so highly alert about how they react and interact in the world that we are in today. Every single day, it's a painful, it's a difficult experience at times. So something to be mindful of. And I think having diversity in the office space definitely lends to diverse feedback on all levels of, your project management experience.
Yep. And that intentional diversity is very important. Just don't hire seat fillers, right? Yeah. Just don't hire seat fillers, then not respect them, right? Because then it's like I could get a test dummy to sit in that seat really and do the same job. So it's like very important to be intentional about the diversity, because one thing, at least that I feel in regards to the industry that I've been, giving my life to for the last 14 years, is that the advertising business just hasn't been culturally ready ever.
Yeah.
For Black and brown people of color and women ever. So as we move along with these questions and these times that we're living in, there's a lot of people kind of stepping up to the plate now, right? So you have people that are stepping up to the plate now. I'm going to pause real quick so everyone can just take a breath. They're stepping up now, right? So they're stepping up now because they want to be allies. Whereas, there've been great individuals like yourselves that have been doing this work, right? So you've been advocating for this work for over 10 years. Yeah. But can you quickly kind of, for the audience here today, tell them the difference between an advocate and an ally?
Definitely.
Those two?
First of all, I want to start off with saying that I think both advocates and allies are needed. And I'm going to explain why. And I'm going to first, note, well, what's the difference, right? So I think, as an ally, you may, or highly likelihood, you are not a person of color, highly likelihood, but you understand you have taken time to not only listen, learn, hear, feel, and allies, you know, can be in any space, whether we're talking LGBT, whether we're talking the racial, whatever, right? But you truly, deep down internally, you support a cause, and you support the actions that are happening to create progress around a certain area, right? You are an ally. You are standing in lockstep in this conversation. As an advocate, you live this conversation, right? You live this every single day. As an advocate, there's a little more risk, right? Because advocacy goes beyond just kind of words and language and kind of, you know, I'm here for you and I support you. Advocacy really steps into being actionable, right? And when you become actionable, there's a risk. There's a risk that if you're actionable in the workplace, that you might, you know, you might, one, not be heard. You might, two, lose a job or a position. You might, three, be looked at as aggressive or as, you know, you're not confirming or you don't fit in with what our, you know, what we want to see happening in the company. When you are an advocate, you know, step outside of what is the norm and what is expected. You have the very uncomfortable conversations, right? You're fearless in the process of being an advocate. As an advocate, it's not only risky, right? Because now your work, your reputation, all of that is online. But it's also emotionally a draining conversation, right? Because when you go home, you're not able to separate yourself from this conversation, from the work that you're advocating around. You not only you're risking yourself, you're risking your mental health and your wellness, you're risking your family's health and wellness, because everyone now becomes a part of this advocacy conversation. It goes way beyond you and your everyday and your workplace. So I think that allies are important because allies, you have a very, very important place and role to play. Your support is critical in gaining the access that advocates need to now become that change agent, right? Because sometimes it just takes some language to open up a door. It takes somebody, you know, supporting the advocate in the meeting who may say, no, well, we said we were doing this, but our actions really look like this. It takes an ally to step in and say, one, not only am I hearing you, but two, now we can create real change. It takes leaders of organizations to, at minimum, be in a position of an ally, because change starts from the top. It starts from leadership. And so now the leaders can truly, you know, as an ally say, we're not going to just talk about this talk. We're going to walk the walk. We're going to put our money behind it. We're going to put the actions behind it. And we're going to be very uncomfortable and know that we are not doing this thing properly. We're going to invest in the right people who can support and know. We're going to diversify our environments. We're going to do everything that is needed to not just say, you know, not just put out the marketing spiel saying there's a commitment to this or a commitment to that, but making sure that our inside the organization, we're seeing change, that the people who work in our company, you know, that we take time and we really hear them and we give them space. And that's the job of an ally. You know, I think those are the two things that are different. Both things are needed, but I think there's a differentiation between the risk that an advocate takes versus, you know, that of an ally. You know, it's a little easier to just say, okay, we hear and we know. It's a completely different story to become actionable and really start creating a real true shift. And then being able to know that, well, this thing isn't working, or we're not hitting the dot, we're not hitting this on the mark. You know, now we're going to do real change management to kind of shift the direction that we're going in.
100%. And one thing that I just want to, just a piece of advice to all of our allies, regardless if you're ally for race, sexual orientation, whatever the case may be, when you step into the shoes of being an ally, don't think that that makes you the authority, right? So like, I'm all for women's rights and all that great stuff, and I'm all for the LGBTQ and everybody, whatever the case may be, but never can I say, oh, I really know what it's like to be a Black woman or a white woman or LGBTQ, trans, whatever the case may be. I can never put myself in that place because that's not what I am. So I think it's very important for our allies to always remember that being an ally, like you said, is 100% great, but do not think you're the authority to think like, oh, because, you know, I'm for them, so I automatically know what's best for them. Right?
Yes, that was Keni. You know, that was a part of our conversation last week. That's the most important thing in that role, right? When you're an ally, you truly, what you do is create space. You create space for advocates. You create space for people who are living this for real. And you have to remember that. You create space, but because you do, this is not your lived experience, there's no way you can truly know, you know, what can fix a environment that you may have in some ways been, you know, supporting the creation of it unknowingly. You just don't know. So as an ally, your job is know that you do not know what you do not know. And let me find the folk with the lived experience who are willing to be bold and uncomfortable, and who I'm willing to really listen and hear them to create change. Let them lead the definition of what policies are formed and so on and so forth. And then let me as an ally partner with them in the implementation process. And that's the differentiation.
Because allies also have to understand that they already have that access, right? They already have that opportunity. They already have that exposure, right? To these things that some of these Black and brown and women communities don't already have. So it's like, look, you've already had this. So, but don't think, but you've already had this, but you've also created this problem of disparity. Like, why disparity? I'm like, why disparity? So it's very important to kind of operate one from a place of peace and truth as well. One thing that you mentioned about the emotionally draining part of the conversation, right? Because now everyone wants to talk about education. Oh, we need to educate ourselves better and blah, 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 blah. I'm like, okay. So since education has been like the main point that organizations are trying to do to address things like racism, pay inequity, and things of that nature, how do you think this is accurate in areas? Do you think this is accurate, and what other areas do organizations need to look at?
Got it. So education is top. It's number one, right? Because unless you have true visibility, understanding of a situation, you will never get to the point where you have the true answer on how to even fix, shift, or change the experience. You just will never get there. You know, I always, you know, I lend back to my experience growing up. I'm originally from Cranston, Rhode Island. Some of you may know Cranston, some of you may not. But growing up until we moved to Providence, we were the only Black family. There were 4 kids. We hit all the grades in elementary school. We were the only Black family in my school. And that experience really shapes that, and then shifting into a more diverse environment really shifts kind of, you know, my outward experience today. Because I think that as people of color, we do not have the privilege of not knowing, right? So I have never had, and most people of color do not have the privilege of not knowing, investigating, understanding other cultures. It doesn't exist, right? We do not have the experience of, you know, at minimum, not knowing the Eurocentric culture. Like we just can't do that, right? We have to understand certain things to just survive on a daily basis. You know, people talk about like shifting your voice and how you speak to one group versus another group, or shifting what you wear and shifting how you present. There's certain things you're embedded with to you know, to survive in an environment where you can be accepted, right? To survive in an environment where you want to grow or have access to money or have access to jobs or education or whatever. There's things that you just learn. It's, you know, cultural things that you have to learn and accept. That being said, on the same point, there's so many things, you know, that I, you know, speak to the different communities that I represent, that you just have the ability to not know about the African American community, about different people of colors. You can live your whole life with not knowing these things, right? That's not a privilege that we have. And because of that, when we talk about education, I think that we don't have the privilege, so we find every single resource we can, whether it's going online and Google searching something, right, to figure out, well, what is the historical context of this? We figure out every way to access information, and that's just how we live, right? You're always trying to learn, figure out, okay, well, how do I handle this thing? I think that what the business world and you know, Eurocentral communities could really lend from is that being proactive in the education process. So I know now we're in the space because there's a lot of noise. There's a lot of, you know, a lot of things came together at once right now. We have COVID, we have, you know, a presidential office that has created a lot of divisions and continue to stir up, you know, divisive language. We have, you know, just overall, both on the political sides of the spectrum, both sides are, you know, stuck in their ways. We have COVID. We then have all of this leading to this conversation around Black lives and looking at the inequitable participation on there's not a single area of life that you could look at that there's not economic disparity for people of color. You're looking at health, education, access, business, every single area you can think of. I don't care how. I was in a conference at Harvard not too long ago, and my husband was on a panel, and one of the doctors were saying how, you know, wealthier African American women, we had the highest rates of, you know, losing our children, you know, and they were talking about the stress and all of those things and how you're not hurt in the hospital and so on and so forth. Education is so important. Proactive education is important. Proactively figuring out what you don't know. And what that looks like is taking time to do research beyond maybe what we've learned generally in the history books, right? Taking time to see what types of revisions have been made in history. It's an uncomfortable thing to accept, but this is the name of the game that we live in. Taking time to understand not only what has happened historically, but what continues to happen today. What continues to happen today that leads to inequitable situations? Taking that time to just learn. And because when you learn, when you're educated, at minimum, you grow some level of empathy. And when you learn, you have to be open to the uncomfortableness of learning, right? When you learn, there'll be things that you hear and you see that makes you very, very uncomfortable. It's not supposed to be a comfortable process. It's not, because when you growth, right? As a child, you're learning how to walk and talk and speak, and you might fall and you hurt yourself and you start to cry, but you grow from that experience. All throughout your adult, you know, areas, you're growing, you're having hard, difficult times, but every time you run into a hard, difficult life situation, you grow. Growing and the educational process is not a comfortable, easy process. And in this civil rights conversation, the 2020 civil rights conversation, that process will not be any more comfortable. And it'll be even more uncomfortable because you realize that I've probably played a role in this because I didn't know, right? Got it, good, understood. Now take the time to learn and shift, because you don't know what you don't know. And only when you know more can you now hold yourself accountable for doing better in the future. So I think education is important. The next thing after education is advocating. It's one thing to know, and now you know better, but if you don't create the real change, which is even more uncomfortable than learning, you are just now being a part of that systemic. When we use the term systemic, you become a part of that systemic structure that is creating continuous inequity and inequitable practices.
Awesome, awesome. So one of the questions that we have is, how do companies like yours set up your clients to accurately address centuries of racial disparity?
Excellent. So quick background. So our Wilkins Consultants, that is my consulting firm. We've been around for almost 10 years. We work in really 3 areas of business: fundraising and capital sourcing, project management, which is our big space, and under our project management, and then technology systems integration. So all of this falls under the arm of project management. So we help companies, whether private, nonprofit, government, bring their most difficult projects to fruition. And under the project management space, we do compliance work, stakeholder engagement, MWB and inclusionary and D&I initiatives. But we literally work with leadership down to put things in place to help you resolve your most difficult problems or concerns. Okay, so what we do with our clients and what is so important is we bring them through a phased conversation, which all of you should be doing as allies in your space. So the first piece of that is learning, right? It is doing the research-based, whether it's researching the stakeholders in your workspace, whether it's researching the clients that you have, whether it's researching whomever your stakeholders are, your staff, whatever. We hear from the people. We take this research and anchor it in market research to figure out, well, what is the need? And when we talk about education, that's the education process. This is what's happening now. This is what has historically happened. And this is what's creating the continuation, the systemic issues that will continue in your organization. So research is first, and for all the allies, even if it's not coming from you, right? Have someone who is a true advocate come into your organization and, provide the necessary research and information needed to create change. So that's number 1. Number 2, the next thing we do, which is another recommendation, is ensure that leadership is on board, right? If the top decision makers of your organization are not willing, able, and ready to participate in a change management conversation, and not only conversation, but change management activities, you will have a difficult implementation process that will not be effective in the long run. So that next item there is, really ensuring leadership is on board. And if leadership is not ready, getting them ready for real committed change. The next thing is that implementation, right? And true implementation, just like you would have KPIs or metrics for your organization to see if something really worked, you should be having KPIs and metrics for all of your diversity and your D&I conversations, or for any D&I changes that need to happen in an organization, right? And so these metrics are things that you go back to and say, 1, here was the goal, was it implemented, and what was the result of that? And you always go back, collect more information. You might have to, start back over and do it again. It is a process that it takes time. It will not happen overnight. And these are the things that I share with my clients, and I'm sharing with you all today, because to really have true change, long-term, effective implementation in this conversation, you want to make sure at minimum you're, doing those 3 things. And then throughout every single space in that process, that you are creating space for the advocates in your organization, for the people of color, or for whatever disadvantaged group that is part of your conversation. You are giving space to hear them, to understand them, to give them space to breathe, to grieve, to grow, and to tell you that this thing that you're trying right now is not hitting the mark. It's not working for us. We want to see something different.
All right. Well, I hope all of you had your notepads out, and you're clicking your fingers and you're waving your fingers and all of that, because you all just got schooled, okay? In hip hop, we say that was bars, right? That was bars. That was a bar exam. So I would just like to thank you so much, my sister, for spending a little bit of your time this morning, really just either teaching us or some of us giving us a refresher of all the important things that we need to do in this very important time as we move forward into this very new world of working, but also this new world of inclusiveness, diversity, and most importantly, equity, because we gotta get paid. So
Yeah.
that's so very important. Everybody needs to get paid. So
Yeah.
once again, thank you so much for your time, your talent, and most of all, your truth. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Thank you guys for having me. Thank you, and enjoy the rest of the conference. I hope you continue to be filled with inspiration and information. Good luck on your journeys.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Keni and Francilia, for joining us and for providing such really meaningful insights and information about, allies versus advocates and how people can really show up in our new reinvigorated civil rights movement that has never ended. So thank you so much for that. For this next panel, we have Molly Ray. She's the founder of For Momentum and has been a supporter of the Cause Marketing Summit and spoken many times. She always has wonderful insights and works with some really amazing nonprofits and for-profit clients and has just done some really incredible work. Many of you are familiar with Molly. She's going to lead a conversation with 3 other incredible individuals who I will let her introduce, but I'll let you take it over. If you do have any questions for Keni or Francilia, please submit them to us and we will make sure that you get connected to both. I believe they'll both be on Slack, but if not, we'll happily get those answered for you, but we don't, in the interest of time, have time for audience questions. But I'll let you, for real, take it away, Molly, and thank you so much for joining us.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Jen, for having us. And I just have to say thank you to all the speakers this morning. This has been a very energizing session, and we've already learned so much, and I hope to add to the learning train here. So it is my honor and my pleasure to be leading a panel discussion. And it's really focused around how at this moment in time, from a partnership perspective, we're really all in this together. And Jen and I were doing some brainstorming about different topics that we could cover together today, and really felt like this would be hopefully something that would bring some value to the participants. So several months ago, it was a couple months after the pandemic started, like right around the May or June timeframe, we at For Momentum started to get a lot of questions from some of our friends in the space that were getting ready to embark on their fiscal 21 planning sessions that we're going to be starting for July. So kind of, if those of you who didn't have a July fiscal start, think for a moment how it must have felt. So we were getting a lot of questions and a lot of conversation going. And so we decided to host a conversation. And what we did is we held a series of Zoom calls with 18 leading organizations to kind of talk through these issues of trends that they were seeing in the partnership space and how they were planning on addressing their next fiscal year. And so it's from that conversation that forms the content of this discussion. The way we're going to spend our time together is I'm going to quickly introduce my panelists, and then I'm going to share with you the top 3 themes that came out of those partnership discussions. We'll have time for each of the panelists to share a couple of insights from their perspective of what has been their experience with planning partnerships during a pandemic, and then we'll take some time for audience Q&A. So as Jen said, I'm president and founder of an organization called For Momentum. I'm happy to have been a past Cause Marketing Summit speaker and attendee. And so maybe I've met some of you, many of your names look familiar to me and your faces. So we are very involved in the cause marketing landscape, and we have agency services all along the partnership gamut. But one of the most important things that we try to do is listen to the trends in the marketplace and bring forth content like this to help all of us as practitioners serve more effectively. I'm going to give you a quick overview of our panelists today, but I'm going to invite them to join later in the session. But I am so thrilled to have 3 experts in the field. And so pardon me while I look at my notes, because I want to make sure I get these bios exactly right. So our friend Nathan Meesom from Best Friends Animal Society, he is the manager of corporate and influencer partnerships. And he is an award-winning philanthropist, development marketing professional, some Halo Award wins and other accolades. He has more than a 20-year career in the nonprofit sector and has worked for organizations in addition to Best Friends Animal Society, such as American Red Cross, Huntsman Cancer Foundation, and Girl Scouts of the USA. He's also built partnerships with some of the world's most influential brands, including Zappos, Google, TikTok, Skechers, Warner Brothers, and Anheuser-Busch. Also thrilled to invite Janelle Lynn from Donors Choose. She's their Senior Vice President of Partnership and Business Development. And in her role, she builds partnerships with corporations and foundations to support public school teachers and classrooms. She works to secure partnership support for teachers in all 50 states on both national and local levels. And in 2018, she achieved $80 million of classroom funding. So thank you for all you're doing, Janelle. She's been with Donors Choose for 9 years, but she has decades of strategy and partnership experience. And then also welcoming Debbie Thomas from Salesforce.org, where she is the global head of social impact communications. She is the cause communicator and purpose marketer who leads Salesforce.org social impact storytelling. And that's a big job. She heads all the global messaging and market insights and communication and is driven to tell stories that need to be told. Her background is at the UN Foundation and with Cone, among other brands, where she specialized in CSR and cause-related marketing. So we are really looking forward to hearing from the esteemed panel in just a little bit. But before we dive into their discussion, I want to queue up some conversation for them to react to. So I'm going to share with you the top 3 partnership trends from our discussion. And here is a logo shot of the 18 organizations that were involved in this conversation that led to the content that I'm bringing to you. And what I hope you can recognize here is these are some of our top leaders in the CSR and nonprofit space. They have a wide variety of mission space and various organizational structures. And so hopefully there's a little something in here for everyone that's attending today that you can relate to. So when we had the discussion, again, just to put the time frame on it, it was around late May, early June time frame. And, you know, so we were a few months into the pandemic and lots of questions. I mean, our plan A had been thrown out for everyone. Everyone was working on their plan B. And so we just had a very robust conversation. We sent out a survey in advance to ask, what are the top 3 questions on your mind as you navigate this difficult partnership time period? And we then took that data and we culled it into key questions. And the top 3 that really rose to the occasion were the focus on, the tips are to focus on your overall partnership goal, to identify alternative activations, and to be a source of inspiration. And I'm gonna give you a little bit more detail on what each of those mean, as well as some resources that I hope will help you as you try to follow these tips and advice. So partnership tip number 1 about focusing on your overall partnership goal. I think all of us were stopped in our tracks a little bit by what was happening in 2020, early 2020. And what we really had to do was step back and try to keep a longer term frame of mind about our overall mission. And, you know, staying focused on not just the short term emergency, but keeping in line with the long term goals. And so to do that, you know, in the beginning, of your relationship navigation with any partner, you take time to educate your partner about your mission and the impact that you're making. And so it's just a moment in time where you need to take that same approach, but to educate your partners on the effects that the crisis is having on your stakeholders. And I really think that all of us, any mission that is attending this session today, can talk about some unique impact that you've had to your stakeholders. And then also to take the moment in time to refocus. Don't pretend like nothing has changed. You know, address it head on and really refocus your work together on how you can meet the changing needs of the mission in this time frame. And then I want to share 2 resources, and these resources, I came across these resources in the very beginning back in March when all of this was first starting, but I think they're really great references. So I've included links, and as I understand, Jen will be sending out our slides to all of the attendees, so you'll be able to link into these. But the Chronicle of Philanthropy gave advice about how nonprofits can present a phased support to their options. So think about how your mission fits into phases of response, recovery, and resilience, and help your partners understand how they can engage at each of those 3 steps in the process. And then our friends at Perlman and Perlman did a great job helping us to with some of the legal considerations. And I love this term that they came up with, a pause clause in a point of sale or consumer donation campaign. When you couldn't move forward, how could you put language into your agreements to create a bridge in your agreement? Excuse me. So this link actually goes to a webinar that is for free that goes into much greater detail. So 2 examples of innovative partnership pivots that have taken place as a result of the pandemic, and really looking at those marketplace conditions and how you need to think quickly and make a change. So one that I want to feature is work between BGCA and Murphy USA. We actually were involved in helping to support this campaign, and they had, during the April to May time period, so before COVID hit, this was well already in place, to have a register campaign and, you know, to donate $1, $2, or $5. What we were able to do because of the coin shortage that resulted from the COVID situation, which many of you I'm sure are familiar with, we put together new creative to support a round up. So instead of asking for change, you could round up your purchase, and you probably saw a lot of these take place in the marketplace. But the great news is Murphy, as a great partner to BGCA, was really ready to kind of, I guess, create a little bit of lemonade out of lemons and take a marketplace condition and turn it into something good to help our community. And at last count, this program had generated well over $1 million. So it's a very successful marketplace pivot. And then I looked for another example from the marketplace, and I thought this was a really beautiful example with Vaseline. And the story here is that Vaseline really was working to address systemic racism, both from a COVID perspective as well as an equity perspective. And what they have done is they've donated over $1 million to Direct Relief. Now, Direct Relief, as I understand the case study, this is not our own work, this is just a marketplace case study. As I understand it, they had already been partners, but Vaseline really stepped up when they recognized that COVID was disproportionately affecting Black and Latino communities. And so they stepped up to create additional ways to support, and in fact donated over $600,000 worth of product, as well as over $1 million to support Direct Relief's fund for community health into populations that needed the support the most. So the second theme is to identify alternative activations. So we all know, again, business is changing, things are different. And so what can we do to really take this moment in time to pivot our partnerships in ways that are appropriate in this particular market? So one of the ideas that came out of our discussion groups, I love this idea, was to develop a partnership toolkit with actionable turnkey assets for this moment in time. So to really help, help your partners be at the ready with tools, know you can anticipate what the questions are going to be and go ahead and prepare those tools and have them at the ready. Also to leverage innovative activations such as digital activations. One of our participants shared that they had created a specific benefits matrix to take advantage of this particular moment in time, virtual executions, and then targeting new audiences such as employees. So this little artwork call out is from a remote volunteering toolkit from Kilpatrick's Townsend, which is a local law firm, probably a global law firm with a local office, I should say, where they did a fantastic job of creating materials at the ready, so that they could keep momentum. I want to give a shout out and give a couple of recent examples of some great digital activation work that is becoming so popular. So the Arthritis Foundation partnered with CVS, and they created a digital platform where you could load an image into this photo frame, and $5 would be donated from CVS on your behalf to the Arthritis Foundation. And this had great traction. They were able to generate several thousand followers and over 2 million media impressions. And so it was a great success. Another really creative example of a marketplace, program that was created out of all of this craziness is the Oscar Myers shares 1 million meals with Feeding America. And if you notice here, I love this social distancing map of 12 hot dogs apart. And so that's a really cute and innovative way to I guess, really give a relatable way to keep your appropriate social distance. And this, so it was very, very creative, but it was also very impactful because they were able to generate over 1 million meals, right, as the base donation. And then for every post that people made of their own front yard cookout with the hashtag, they donated another meal. So just a great example of how to create, a program during the pandemic that is meaningful. And then the third tip for advice, and this really is so important, is to be a source of inspiration. And so, of course, to be a source of inspiration, both externally with the general marketplace by sharing positive stories of impact. I think we could all use some good news right now in terms of, how we want to hear some good things that are happening in the world, to also, in a time when maybe partners don't have cash available, or maybe they're having their own, we can look at Brittany's slides and look at recession issues that may be going on, shift those partner efforts toward accelerating awareness and really spotlighting mission. And then last but not least, do not forget your internal colleagues, and be sure to provide the resources that your team needs. And especially think about your frontline fundraisers these days, because it's a tough position to be in, and make sure they are equipped with what they need to do their job effectively, as well as maybe just some morale boosters to make sure that they are staying energized. Maybe we could have Lisa walk them through the meditation that we went through earlier. That would be great. So one marketplace example of inspiration and inspiring collaborations, I just love this example between Save Our Children and No Kid Hungry. And you don't often see a collaboration between leading nonprofits like that. So that in and of itself, I believe, is very inspiring to see these effective collaborations taking place. And they launched in very quick time the hashtag Save With Stories campaign, where celebrities went on and read books that children could download. This is, think back to March. This one came out very quickly when kids were having to stay home from school and they needed activities to do. And so this really filled a very important gap in the marketplace. And there's now over 100 stories, and it's generated support for over 90,000 kids in 200 school communities. And so it's a great example of leveraging an innovative partnership during this time. And I just want to leave you with one tip, and this is so basic, but it just is so important, and that is the importance of maintaining personal connections. And I just really encourage you to make a human connection with your partners. I put on here, schedule an agenda-free call. And I mean that. I mean, no business agenda. Just check in and see how they're doing. How are they adjusting to their work-life balance in whatever situation they're facing? Everybody's working from home. Maybe they're managing school-aged children. So just don't forget how important, your relationship, your personal relationship is as a part of your overall business relationship, and social distance doesn't have to mean social isolation. So with this, I'm going to now turn it over to the panel discussion. I am not seeing my panelists, but I'm sure they are here. I know they're here, but I don't know why in this view I can't Let me see if I can
I
find.
think if they share their video and they start talking, they'll start.
They'll pop up. Excellent. Okay, great. So we're going to start with Nathan. Nathan, can you take the mic?
Absolutely. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Perfect. Hi, everybody. Good morning from California. I'm still waking up a little bit over here, so bear with me. But first, I want to thank Molly and everyone at For Momentum for having me, and also everyone at Cause Marketing Summit for hosting this event. Before I get into some partnership conversations, I want to talk about some shifts that our organization has made and the entire animal welfare movement in general as a result of COVID-19. So in March, when the pandemic really started to unfold, animal shelters across the country were forced to close their doors, which meant that we had to find homes for every animal in our care. And fortunately for us and those animals, the community really stepped up. In March, foster programs nationwide increased by more than 90% over the previous month. And just at Best Friends, we've placed 46% more pets in foster homes this fiscal year. So we've definitely seen the kindness of the community during this time. And we've had to shift some of our programs and adoptions. So we've shifted all of our adoption events to national virtual adoption events where people can find their pet online, complete the adoption application, do a virtual meet and greet, and then schedule a socially distanced pickup. And then also recently in Los Angeles, we held a drive-through kitten adoption event that was really fun and really successful. So obviously this has been quite a year, and through all the challenges, it can be hard to see the positive, but this time of tremendous change has revealed some remarkable opportunities for Best Friends and the entire animal welfare movement. We found that COVID-19 offered a proof of concept for a community-supported sheltering model that we wanted to move to anyway. And it's a model that engages communities to prevent animals from entering shelters in the first place. Because really, no matter how clean and well-maintained our shelters are, we know that they're not an ideal environment for a pet. So by placing adoptable animals into foster homes, we're able to get a better understanding of that pet's personality and their behavior and the way they're going to act when they do get placed into a home. And having that information will help us as we try to match them with their perfect forever home. And the other thing that we're noticing is that families are sharing photos of their photos and information really about their foster pets on their social pages. So in many cases, these volunteer foster families are finding permanent homes for these pets through people in their own network or in their community. So we're gaining access to this whole new group of adopters that we may not have had before. So with that in mind, this is where we really think the future of animal shelters might lie. So now we're working to scale our program offerings, and that means we're reimagining and in some cases completely reducing the brick and mortar footprint of our shelters, and trying to redeploy our financial resources to support even more of our shelter partners across the country and help them drive their programs towards this community-supported sheltering model. So in terms of what we've seen in partnerships, so since March, we've obviously had some partnerships that have stalled. We've had some that were completely put on pause, but we have seen some interesting success stories. So if I were to narrow it down to like 3 key pieces of advice during COVID, I would say that number one, that e-commerce is really booming. Everyone is shopping online at a much higher rate. And so since March, we've seen an increase in what our existing partners are raising through their online point of sale donations. And in turn, many partners who are now solely focused on their e-commerce have started consumer-based fundraising on their sites. And if this way of giving is new to your organization, and even if it's not, I would suggest looking into a platform called GiveWorks. It's GIVEWORX. And it's a system that makes it really easy for companies to integrate online giving into their platforms. Number 2, find brands and industries that are thriving. E-commerce is not the only industry that's doing well. So think about the services and the products that you've been using more since March. For example, people are spending more time at home and they want to make their homes more comfortable. So that could lead to a new partnership with a home improvement design company. Also, people are trying to entertain their families and stay sane. So that could lead to partnerships with board game companies or video game companies. And then there are also so many other essential businesses that are doing well. So for example, we recently launched a new partnership with a grocery chain. And similar to the consumer fundraising that's happening online, as Molly mentioned, the coin shortage has also led to some brick and mortar partners that are doing register roundups for us. And then number 3, digital content is king. People are consuming online media at a higher rate than ever before. We have more time to look at our phones. We're using our social channels to connect with our family and friends during isolation. And that means that brands are in a street fight for your attention, and their weapon of choice is stories. So if you can work with these brands to curate that content, you'll be a valuable asset to their marketing teams. For us, like, there are so many kind of silly holidays. So for us, that means like National Dog Day or National Cat Day. And there's so many of these days. I'd encourage you to think about what holidays might be relevant to your sector, and then approach your prospects with content ideas based on that, because it's a great way to kind of organically integrate your messaging. And a good example of this is last month on National Dog Day, Anheuser-Busch partnered with Best Friends on the launch of their new Busch Dog Brew, which you can see the adorable pup there with his dog-friendly brew. There's obviously no alcohol in it, but it allows people to enjoy a cold one with their best friends. And the concept might seem a little bit silly, but this kind of quirky content is highly shareable. And ultimately, this launch earned more than 58 million digital impressions on the days and the days following after the launch. And 99% of those were positive. Also, they expected to sell 3,000 cases in the first month, and instead they sold 7,000 cases in 5 hours. The product is currently sold out. There's more than 16,000 people on a wait list for an October restock. So I would say, as long as this kind of stuff aligns with your mission and your voice, and you can find that silly content, it's a great way to grab attention and bring joy to people right now when we really need it. So I want to be conscious of time. So Molly, I'll turn it back to you.
Okay, that's great. I just have one quick question. Is that sold in 6-packs or 12-packs?
It's actually sold in 4-packs, and it's online only, and it'll be looking to roll out into brick and mortar retail in 2021.
I have some grand pups I need to buy that for.
Yes, you do.
Excellent. Okay, Janelle.
Hi there, everybody. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Okay, great. So first off, thank you so much, Molly and Jen, for inviting me to participate in the summit. Very excited. If you're not familiar with Donors Choose, we're an online charity that helps classrooms in need. We're basically a crowdfunding site where public school teachers will go and post what they most need for their classrooms. And right now, I would say that there are a lot of needs, and those needs are changing by the day even. But to give you a high-level update on our organization, we just celebrated our 20-year anniversary last week. And just a few days after that, before that, we also crossed a huge milestone for us, and we have now delivered $1 billion in school supplies to schools nationwide. But during the pandemic, corporate partnerships for us, and I'm sure for many of you, have been fast and they've been furious. And since COVID forced schools to shut down in March, our team has forged over and launched over 500 partnerships, totaling over 40 million in partnership dollars. And I did the math, I crunched the numbers, and during this time, it took us an average number of 20 days to go from an initial partner conversation to activation. And fun fact, the shortest partnership during this time period has been 1 day to go to launch. So how have we been able to activate so quickly? I'm going to share just two ways. At Donors Choose, and I'm sure at a lot of your organizations, we truly believe in the frontline wisdom of our teachers, and we're constantly in conversation with them and are able to quickly and frequently tap our teachers for insights on their most pressing needs. So just a couple weeks ago, hot off the presses, we sent a survey to over 40,000 teachers to better understand what learning looks like during this unique back to school season. And I'm going to quickly highlight 2 findings from that survey, which those of you who have children in your lives may relate to. So on this slide, tech was the greatest need that we saw for teachers teaching online, which is probably not a surprise to any of you. However, we did discover that the #1 tech request has actually been for headphones. And if any of you have families with multiple kids or other distractions, you know exactly why headphones are so important. You'll also note that one of the highest requested items has been for shelf-stable groceries and snacks for students learning from home. And on the next slide, for teachers who are teaching in person, we saw a huge increase in requests for cleaning supplies and PPE, and followed by basic supplies now that students are having to have their own individual sets of paper, pencils, and other supplies. And we were able to activate really quickly when companies reached out to us, because leveraging this data helped us to inform them on what those immediate and trending needs are of teachers and students. And then we're able to then match the needs with customizing a partnership that matches their goals. So for example, Dell was really concerned after seeing this data with closing the digital divide for low-income students. So we were able to quickly launch a match on any projects requesting headphones. Or Airborne, you know, the health supplement, actually founded by a product that was invented by a teacher. The brand really cares about classroom hygiene and health, and we were able to match project funding of to those goals. And then finally, the second way we're able to activate very quickly is to Molly's earlier point about making everything turnkey for our partners. We have all sorts of toolkits to make it easy to launch. And so here's just one example of a social media kit that we customized for General Motors, who was focused on distance learning and wanted to get something out there as soon as possible. So we had this language pre-customized, the graphics made for them and ready to go. So I'll end it there, but looking forward to discussing more and turning it back over to you, Molly.
Okay, excellent. Thank you so much. Appreciate it, Janelle. Debbie?
Hi, again, thank you, Molly and Jen and Janelle and Nathan. I think everything that Janelle and Nathan said really rung true for me. The fact that technology is key and core to what most people are talking about today. Certainly the fact that weapons are the stories of choice and the fact that people are drinking more beer. I think all of that is so I want to just start with Salesforce.org. For those of you who don't know, we are a social impact center within Salesforce. We operate within the company. And our goal is really to make sure that everyone, nonprofits, educational institutions who deserve to use this best CRM technology have access to it. It's about access to technology and making sure that our community gets it. We have 40,000 members of our community, and we refer to them as our parts of our Ohana. And Ohana in Salesforce lingo means the chosen family. And that's really how we look at our community of 40,000. So that includes nonprofits and includes K through 20 educational institutions as well. And similar to what Janelle did, we took a look at our community and asked them exactly how we could support them when all of the turbulent times of 2020 first began. And what we really saw here was a lot of what you've seen in the Candid research and a lot of what you've seen in the Chronicle of Philanthropy research, that 51% of the Salesforce.org community really said that this had a significant effect on them. And if you go to the next slide, you'll see that our community actually talked a lot, not just about the decreasing funds and donations that they were seeing, but they talked about these other notions of well-being among their staff. This concept of staff burnout, which was very strong in the nonprofit community particularly, and just this inability to provide core services, and then the need to change and pivot on what those services were, which you heard a little bit from Nathan and Janelle as well. So that's something that we've heard a lot from across the board when we talk to nonprofits day in and day out. And a lot of the logos you've already seen on these screens and others are Salesforce.org customers. So we really felt that we had a responsibility here, not just to listen and learn, but to provide a platform where our nonprofits could actually talk to one another. It's a little bit like therapy in times like this, isn't it? Where we all get together and we try to figure out, well, what are you doing? And how are some of the best practices that you're using? How could that apply to us? For example, we've had lots of nonprofits talk to us about virtual galas, virtual fundraising, ways that they could take some of their big, large fundraising moments and really make them sing. And in some of those cases, that was bringing in 80–90% of the revenue for the nonprofit for the year. So these had to be some really quick, important pivots that were really required by the nonprofit community. And we sort of sat there and said, we've got to help. This is our opportunity to help. And what better way to do that when you've got a digital platform that can really support our community. So if you go to the next slide, you'll see that the way that we've sort of looked at this is the digital imperative that has really hit the nonprofit sector. It's always been there. In fact, most nonprofits that are in our community are already looking at ways to create digital transformation within their organizations. They were already looking at new forms of online giving, new forms of communication to donors and their constituents, new ways of managing their caseload and their programs and services. And they were already looking at data data is the most important currency that a nonprofit has, whether that's data for beneficiaries that you're helping, that could be homeless people, it could be students, it could be hunger or people who we're feeding through meals, or it could be, the data that the donors are bringing to the table. We know that this donor gave during these moments. Would this donor be willing to come back? There's so much that data can tell us. So really what we looked at here was asking the nonprofit sector, how can we help you do the following things? Look at different income streams. That means that could be looking at major giving all the way to corporate partnerships. Shifting all of your fundraising online. We launched a new suite of products at the end of April just for this, because we realized how important that fundraising mandate was, particularly online giving. Looking at the digital native, I love the comment that Nathan made about everyone's online all the time, but the juxtaposition there is that people are also suffering from digital fatigue. So what you put out there has to be thumb stopping. It has to matter. Otherwise, no one wants to pay attention to it because we're stuck on these screens all day long and we don't want to spend another moment on a screen. So that's really important. So how can the journey matter? How can you make it personal? And then finally, increasing that service reach and the program impact. And that really, I think is final, but it's actually the most important point, because at the end of the day, the community needs kept rising, even though the nonprofits found themselves in a position where they weren't always necessarily able to respond. If you go to the next slide, you'll see a little bit about what Salesforce.org from a communications perspective was really able to achieve. And of course, the entire Salesforce community got behind us, including Mark Benioff and the company. And what you'll see here is we were able to share the stories. And while I've never referred to storytelling as a weapon, I really appreciate that, Nathan, that it is the choice for this brand for sure, right? Because when you've got 40,000 stories that need to be told, it's a very exciting moment to give your platform up to the stories that can be told. And whether it's customers across Europe or Asia Pacific or customers in North America, we love to talk about the fact that our community on the front lines of COVID responded very quickly. It was all about speed. The second thing we did is the convening power. For those of you who know the brand and know Salesforce, you'll know that we are very much, a lot of people refer to us as a convening company. We are a field marketing company. We put together events on large scales. So we took that and we created virtual spaces for those events. And as I mentioned therapy before, the community got together and started talking to each other about how we can help each other in this crisis, and how to talk about the next normal. And then really asking the question, was the normal before this really better? I think that was a really important moment for all of us in the conversation. And then finally, responding. So this is looking at resources that a company like Salesforce has, whether that's financial or technology or partnership resources that could really help change the game at moments like this. And I think that was really the best way that we could look at the three lessons that we learned the most from our community. And remember, we're constantly learning from them and responding to those lessons, is that speed is critical at times like this. Crisis really fuels innovation. So it's important for us that we look at agility beyond speed. So for example, are you going to be able to pivot again if this crisis takes another turn or something changes tomorrow? And then finally, beyond speed and agility, it's resilience. And I really love that you mentioned that first, Molly, in this conversation, because at the end of the day, I think the pandemic has taught us that this could happen again. And we have to be ready for that new tomorrow. And one of the ways that we know you could be better prepared is to use and leverage some of these resources that we're all building today. So thank you.
Excellent. Thank you so much to all three of you for those insights. And I'm going to start the Q&A portion. We have just about 10 minutes to just have some discussion. So anybody who has a question, please type it into the chat box, and I will go over there in a minute and look and see what you've queued up for me. But in the meanwhile, I'll start the conversation. I would like each of you to just share a little bit about, you've each shared a lot about your future opportunities, but sometimes we learn things from challenges. So I'm asking you to be vulnerable now if you can, and share maybe a partnership that you had previously contracted that you were not able to deliver. And what did you do? What did you do with that situation? And so I'm just going to go in the order that we went earlier. Nathan, I'll start with you, and then Janelle, and then Debbie. if you have an example.
Sure, I have more examples than I wish that I had. In March, we were actually right in the middle of a register roundup in every Bloomingdale's store. So when the country kind of shut down around the middle of March, that roundup had to end. So we saw numbers that we were not expecting, and all of kind of a lot of work that we put into it. So we're hoping that Bloomingdale's will, as Molly mentioned, have like a pause clause, and maybe we can do something when they reopen. We also had some major fundraising events that our corporate partners were going to be doing. One in particular this summer that was actually kind of well, it was a road trip across the country, and obviously that wasn't able to happen. So we had to kind of put that on pause as well, and we're hoping that we might be able to do it in 2021, but you know, who knows? And then we had some partners that unfortunately went out of business. Their stores closed, unfortunately, and that was a real bummer. And so for us, it was just about being as compassionate as possible, trying to work with them around some of their minimum commitments and try to get them out of their agreements in a way that made sense and not, you know, with complete understanding that the times that we're in. So.
Okay, great. Thank you for sharing. Janelle, do you have an example?
Yeah, so 2 examples. One was with the Chan Zuckerberg initiative. They were really focused on providing field trips for students in Title I schools. And obviously when COVID happened, we weren't able to do that. Our team was, I love Devi's phrase about digital imperative. Our team was really focused on how do we transition a lot of these partnerships to a digital alternative, and we've created a platform for virtual field trips and sourced virtual field trips for this program, and so we're able to transition that. And then the second, to Nathan's point, we did have a couple of companies, and I won't name them, that either shuttered or had some financial difficulties, and their marketing program had to pivot. One of them was a 7-figure partnership, and because we really value their partnership in the long term, we did allow them to have a pause in the agreement. We also allowed them to alter the minimum for that, knowing that their intentions were to come back to us when they had the marketing dollars again, but honoring just sort of the value of the relationship over just the sheer dollars in this moment.
Excellent. Devi?
Yeah, I think I can give a couple of examples here, not so much of partnerships that went away or became challenging, but partnerships that quickly pivoted. What we really saw in the education space was that we would be working on projects that were sometimes 24 months, 18 months projects that we had to quickly work with partners in to move to an online model very quickly, usually within 12 hours. So 12 to 24 hours was the turnaround. So for those of you who have ever been sort of bogged down by the bureaucracy of digital transformation, I think this pandemic has really showed us that we can move pretty quickly when we need to, and when all the decision makers are at the table and we're making decisions in real time. So I'd want to share the example of the University of Kentucky, which actually has been in the news. So many of you may have seen this story already. That is, 30,000 students coming back to campus, 50,000 faculty and staff, and all of them are connected to something called the Salesforce Command Center that the University of Kentucky has launched. And what that does is really help you with everything from health tests early in the morning, figuring out where the students are going throughout the course of the day, exactly where the faculty are, what classes the students are attending, either virtually or in person, how students are performing in a time like this. Are we keeping them engaged? Are we making sure retention is there? Everything that would matter on a campus in a time like COVID, they were able to do very, very quickly. And a huge kudos to the University of Kentucky team that pulled that together. And we see that across the board with K through 12 as well, and the adjustments that are being made there in the Oakland Unified School District and numerous other K through 20 schools around the country. We also see this when it comes to virtual galas, which I think I mentioned before. We saw this with ACS and with Apaya, where they were really able to quickly take a look at what their gala looked like and offer some of those same benefits. So they were offering sponsorship levels sometimes at the same amount or greater for celebrity experiences, celebrity chef experiences, even in a virtual environment. Now that's creativity. That's incredible to think that they were able to do that and saw 143% increase in funds raised through their virtual gala, probably leading them to ask the question, did we really have to have an in-person gala ever? This was really, really successful and something people enjoyed doing. I mean, imagine putting on a gown and hanging out in your kitchen while you're on a Zoom call. I mean, that's what some of these nonprofits were able to do. So some great examples.
Awesome. Thank you so much for sharing. I'm noticing that we just have 1 minute left. So I'm going to do a rapid fire round. I'm going to ask you just to share 1 or 2 quick gut reactions to this question, which is, we've talked a lot about what you were doing before, some pivots you've had to make, some things that didn't quite work out. What is on, if we were to have a peek onto your personal to-do list, what's next for you in terms of what you are planning next for your next growth opportunity? And I'm gonna go again, the same rotation, Nathan, just to give them a chance to breathe after just speaking. So what would we see on your to-do list in terms of identifying growth opportunities?
Sure. I think some of the stuff I mentioned earlier, but we're working heavily with a lot of tech companies, a lot of web companies. I have partnership contracts in the works. We've seen an increase actually over the last couple months in what our partners are doing. So I think that we're on track to get the partnership momentum started up again.
Excellent. Janelle?
We really subscribe to that 3-prong model that you were talking about with Chronicle Philanthropy of the relief, recovery, resilience. And we're already planning for the resilience phase, knowing that we're nowhere close to resilience, but what does resilience look like? For us, it looks like mental health and social emotional learning. It looks like ways to sustainably close the learning gap, the learning loss that's happened over the past few months. So we're planning out partnerships that really address those issues.
Awesome. Debbie?
Yeah, we're really looking at resilience through the lens of accessibility and making sure that everyone has access to the tools and the technology that they need to be able to digitally transform in the new normal, which it really is a forever normal, right?
It is. Yeah. And I'll just close it out with what's on my to-do list, which is really looking at the internal dynamics of our partners in terms of not just what marketplace conditions they're navigating, but what they're navigating with regard to changes in human and financial resources and how they need to do things differently and how we can create new models to help them do that. So with that, I will turn it back to you, Jen.
Thank you. And thank you so much, Molly. That was really insightful. And to all of our panelists, Nathan, Janelle, Debbie. We did have one question come in that I thought we should just ask in case anyone does have a response, and it's okay if you don't, but someone was wondering if the Black Lives Matter movement has also informed any pivoting in storytelling and partnerships or fundraising, if they've worked on that movement at all.
I'll jump in there. So we have fortunately been working on not just diversity and inclusion, but representation in the classroom 3 years prior to the recent racial justice or the murders of George Floyd and Ahmaud Arbery and Breonna Taylor. And so because we had this foundation of this huge partnership with Google.org, we were sitting on this wealth of data where now to date we have data from over 125,000 teachers, demographic data on these teachers, including racial identity. And so now we're starting to partner with, you'll see some announcements from us in the next few weeks, actually partner with some large foundations and corporations on funding Black educators specifically, sourcing from Black bookstores. And we just also launched a partnership with the Equal Justice Initiative. So it's really informed our work a lot. And we were able to pivot some of the existing COVID partnerships to equity forward partnerships pretty quickly because of that foundation.
Amazing. So thank you so much, like I said, to everyone. If we have any additional questions that come in, I will encourage folks to send them to you directly. I think I'm speaking for everyone, but that was a lot of great insight that you offered. I really love what Debbie said, that crisis fuels innovation, and hopefully we'll see more innovation and solutions come in the coming months and the coming years. So thank you so much, everyone, for contributing. So I'm really thrilled to introduce our next panel of entrepreneur, boss, parent, they all happen to be moms, to the event. I know many parents have had to pivot, have had to juggle, especially even caretakers of other folks. And so the idea here is that people are pivoting. All the women on this panel have changed their careers, have built businesses, have gone solo for some time period. And so they're going to be a great group of folks to hear from in this climate. And I'm going to introduce Pamela Peckerman. I think you have co-hosting abilities now. So if you want to unmute, all of our panelists can unmute. Pamela Peckerman, Stacey Eagle, Dr. Zavina Basin, and Nicole Young. So we're thrilled to have you.
Hi,
Pamela,
everyone.
if I can spotlight you.
I'm going to, Stacey, you're unmuted. Sabina, Nicole. Okay.
Hi.
Hi, everyone. I feel good. I feel like I should be taking off a layer. I really
Hi.
I'm sweating.
I see people. I see you with your children, people. I see you. And I really see little ones who are downstairs having lunch at homeschool. So it is a juggle, it is a struggle. Jen, thank you so much. So we are gonna dive right in. This panel is called Moms on a Mission. My name is Pamela Peckerman, and I'm the founder of Hustle Like a Mom, which is a community of women that are building a bridge from mom life to entrepreneur life. And we empower them with accountability, shared experiences, virtual events now, obviously. That was my big pivot. In fairness, I will say I had to do a massive pause from March through June because it was a first grader and kindergartner and all hands on deck, these two hands, and nobody else in the house. So it was a juggle and a struggle. And I know these ladies have similar situations at home, but we're making it through, we're pivoting, we're making changes, and we're gonna get into that. And I'm also on the board of directors for the Vasculitis Foundation, which is a rare autoimmune disease. And so I do that in honor of my late father and for the community there. And I incorporate what I do with Hustle Like a Mom, giving back to vasculitis and using my platform to promote and amplify this cause. So without further ado, I will start off with one of our panelists, who is Stacey Eagle. Some of you might recognize her name, her face from previous cause marketing summits. Stacey is the founder of Boy Meets Girl, a fashion and lifestyle brand that has been on the forefront of athleisure style for 20 years, and an outspoken supporter of numerous causes. I won't name all of them, but this is one of the rare people who genuinely can do a lot of causes and make it feel so, so genuine. She's been committed to anti-bullying, the LGBTQ rights. Most recently, her work has also included Survivor Corps, which was formed to provide research institutes with an easy way to connect with COVID-19 survivors directly. And she's also been very active in the Black Lives Matter movement. Stacey is also the co-host of the podcast, Moms Got This, so definitely check that out. Next, we have Nicole Young. Hi, Nicole. It's nice to see you. Nicole is a veteran journalist and TV correspondent, regularly appearing on Pix 11, Good Day New York, and sharing her tips and commentary in Reader's Digest and Huffington Post, among others. Her work focuses on health and wellness, and Nicole believes that a healthy body is your best asset. And she is passionate about empowering and supporting the wellness and health of the Black community. And last but not least, Dr. Zavina Basin. Hi.
Hi.
Is the founder, and coming to us from Cali, is the founder of In Kids, a kids subscription box that focuses on exposing children to different cultures and communities, one country at a time. So all the parents, this is awesome, awesome, awesome. She launched this in early 2020. What a great time to launch a product. Dr. Basin is on a mission to help raise globally aware kids that value and embrace diversity and enjoy sharing their uniqueness while appreciating the uniqueness of others. And I think we could all agree that in today's climate, we desperately need more of that. So I'm going to open up with a question and be mindful of time because I think we want to try to leave some time for Q&A. So first question, and any of the ladies who'd like can answer. Nobody knows how to handle chaos with control quite like a mother. How has parenthood empowered you to be an effective entrepreneur?
Who wants to take it? I'll take it. Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm like, me. So I love that question, Pamela, and hi to everyone. So motherhood is the ultimate test of will, resilience, determination, drive, troubleshooting, and crazy navigation, or navigating crazy, I should say. And all of those are the things that you basically need to start a business, keep a business going, and be successful at whatever business it is you're trying to do. So motherhood is something that really gives you a crash course in all of those tools that you need to sort of survive entrepreneurship. That makes sense.
Stacy wanted to add to that.
Hi, Nicole. Hi, everybody.
Hi.
This is so awesome. Thank you, Jennifer, for leading this, and Pamela for being our panel extravaganza host. I love you so much. Yeah, I think that, you know, whether you're a mother or not a mother in this time period, we've all had to pivot, and especially us being mothers on this panel, you know, we have had these working lives that have been 24/7, whether you're in New York or LA, and hustling and going and going and going. And here we are in this state of pandemic with a pause in our world, but we've had to juggle our children and our working lives. And so I think being a mother, we've had to understand that when we were in the hustle and moving and traveling and going on camera or going to launch a product in Finland. And so I think within this time period, having those skills on top of being a mother is just like times a million, right? And so somehow we have navigated, and all of us who are here right now are in it and still moving forward. And that's what I think as mothers, we keep moving. And that's my only advice for everybody here, is that whether you are looking for a job or are in a job or trying to pivot to create something new or stay afloat, that if you keep your eyes and your focus right now, just like you are as a mother, you can succeed, I think.
Yeah. I was going to just add, so you said focus. I actually think about it. When we focus on the kids, what do we ultimately want to focus on? I'd like to keep them alive. I mean, that's like the bare essentials, right? At the end of the day, if you say, well, I've kept them alive, so we're good, we're good. And it's almost like the same way, like you said, like if you're still moving with respect to your business and your career, it's still alive, good. Then focus on that. And then the next sort of level will come. Doc?
Well, first I want to say thank you for having me here. Thank you, Pamela. Thank you, everyone who is here. And it's nice to meet Nicole and Stacy. I'm big fans of theirs. So I have to say they are very inspiring as women and as entrepreneurs and moms. I'm going to really, it's the same thing Stacy and Nicole are saying. Being a mom just navigates us to become who we are as entrepreneurs. And in today's era, especially with COVID, we are not only trying to help our children get through it, I think we are trying to mentally help ourselves get through it. And that's the importance of what we're trying to do. And we have to not give our children time, but we also have to give our businesses time. So it's trying to find that organized schedule or even that chaotic schedule, but to give ourselves a little time to navigate through all of this. And it's just that mental clarity and that mental moment to say, let's take a step back and give one piece of our time to what it is, our business or our children. So that's all I can say, but I agree with Stacy and Nicole. It makes us who we are better.
Yes, I think well said, ladies. And one thing I'll add to that came out from me during my legit pause between March and June, where I just had to kind of come to terms with the fact that I could not create anything, was that the only difference between a pause and progress is judgment. And guess what? There is nobody around you judging you except for yourself. So if right now your mission is to keep somebody alive, then okay, and look for the next path and make the small pivot, whatever that might be, digitally, et cetera.
Okay. No one would know Pamela was on a pause from March.
But my business bank account would. I'm very good to that.
That's right. Social media versus your bank.
That's a great lesson. What you see isn't always what you get, but you have to keep it moving anyway. I love that.
I did try to show what I was doing though, which was a lot of vacuuming. Nicole, you've taken more ownership of your voice and its power this year. I've noticed that as your friend. How can we all see power and use our business to be change makers? Because I feel like everybody thinks like, oh, well, you're on TV, so you have a platform, which isn't always the case. You've already had that, but this year you've stepped into it more. So how can somebody really step into their voice and use their business as a change platform?
That is 100% correct. An assessment to make. I did sort of hone in and zero in a little bit more directly into where I wanted my message to be, what I wanted my focus and my goals to be. And I think that the first thing I would say to anyone is don't let a turmoil prevent you from getting on track. So sometimes the turmoil is the track. So in my case in particular, once sort of this reawakening, I'll call it, because believe it or not, we have been here before. Once this reawakening with racial justice sort of bubbled up to the top in the past 6 months, I felt like I was even more empowered to call out some of these discrepancies that I was finding within how wellness was promoted to people of color, in particular Black and brown communities. And it's not to say I didn't see that before or that I wasn't saying that before, but the message was easier to deliver and people were listening more carefully at that point. So for me, I saw that as an opportunity to, okay, let me really focus in, let me come up with a specific plan on how I want to drive this message further now that I have people's attention and it's a little bit more receivable, if you will. Like there was a time where I felt like I was saying this, but no one was listening apart from you and friends and family. Like no one was listening, but all of a sudden everyone wanted to hear it. And I was like, perfect. So sometimes a turmoil or tragedy can really get you on track and you shouldn't be afraid of it. If anything, you should try to, I used to hate this term, but it's become life now. You got to lean into it. Sometimes the tragedy is going to put you on track and don't run away from it. Lean in.
Does anybody else want to add to that with respect to like any resources or tips that you have uncovered over the last year or so with respect to owning your power, but also as a business, how do we, because I think a lot of us have had something said to us where, oh, you're not in the space to do that. Pam or Nicole or you or Stacey, you've been here. Do you really want to go there? Do you really want to go and launch that podcast that has nothing to do with style or fashion or mompreneurship? Have any of you experienced that? Because I feel like maybe some of the people who are listening might want to add some cause to their business that seems off, but feels right.
I'm sorry. Do you guys mind? As I hog the whole, in relation to what I was saying, as far as that voice, whether it's coming from someone else or in your own head, where it's like, I can't do that. That doesn't fit with what I was doing before. The truth is sometimes you have to quiet that noise because you'd be surprised to see how things do tie in. There's no mistake when you feel something passionate and there's a pull and what you're doing already might not seem like they are in sync. Those things don't happen by accident. I believe that there is a common thread and sometimes you have to weave it yourself or you have to look for ways to put it together. So in my case, for example, my background was always in fashion and I segued over time into the wellness and the health space and the nutrition space. But at the end of the day, what's on the outside and what's on the inside do connect. So if you're going to put the effort into dressing yourself well and what works best for my body and what should I be be wearing and buying, the same is true for what you should be eating and how you should be staying active. And so I worked hard on piecing that together myself and making that connection so that I could bring that message as part of my branding. So don't let those voices, don't let the fear keep you from figuring out, well, maybe these do tie in together, because a lot of times they do.
I think it's a good point. I think it's the string of messaging and how you relate it. I mean, obviously, you just don't want to throw it out there. You do want to, especially if it's part of your business. And I know, Stacey, you've done so many different causes. You don't just throw it out there. You create a plan around it. And for anybody who's listening that wants to add a program, a platform to their business that has a philanthropic aspect to it, it's not necessarily, it's going to be on when you frame it in the on right way. Yeah. And I think, Stacey, you're a great example of that, because you have had so many different causes, some that stay on, some that come and go, obviously. Right. But you've been able to weave all of them under one umbrella, which is to continue to inspire.
Right. So for me, I think in this time frame, the causes that I am a part of have always been on my almost 20 years of owning a business. So being approached during this time to work in causes that are bringing awareness to being an anti-racist and helping Survivor Corps bring awareness to what they're doing and their mission. And I have a collaboration with an artist named Annabelle, who is bringing awareness to what happened in Beirut. So the brand for me has always been a mission-driven brand. I launched the brand after 9/11. It was supposed to be the week of 9/11. So my first collection was donated to the American Red Cross from victims of 9/11. So we've been reactive to what's been going on. And I think that has shaped who we are as a brand, to give back, bring people together as a community. And sometimes things like the bringing awareness to Beirut might have not been what my consumer knows about. And a lot of times people come to Boy Meets Girl to learn about new causes. And that's the things that I like to do, to bring awareness to anti-bullying, to bring awareness to breast cancer awareness. So we're able to do that. I think a lot of times now, brands who want to jump on board and be part of a message, whether that's Pride during Pride Month, I mean, that's great that any brand wants to help out. Sometimes it could be looked at as pinkwashing or other names for it, but I think that anybody who wants to help, whether it's voting right now with all the brands who are getting on board, I think that's so great. As a fashion brand, you can come together as a team. So for us, you know, I've been very fortunate to, since March to now, been super busy, pivoted, you know, from being in the garment center for 15 years to being in my home, which is where it all started. So, you know, I've had these incredible cause brands come to me to want to work with me because of what we've been doing. And so going back to what Nicole said, you know, sometimes you think about, will this be, you know, is this what I've been speaking about? Is that what I should be doing? Will I look, you know, as someone who just jumps on another cause? But luckily, thank God, people know what I've been doing as a brand. And so that when I think about working with that organization, it's our consumer and our fans know that it's authentic because of our history, and we really are giving facts about how you can get involved. You know, during the time of the beginning of COVID, no one knew where to go for resources for having COVID, and so that's how I joined forces with Diana Barrett from Survivor Corps to carry on, bring awareness through clothing, through masks to her organization, because this was the only platform where people could find resources. So I guess, I don't know if I'm getting offline, but for me, anything that I'm jumping into that has a cause mission, which is what is the ethos of our brand, is something we do think about before we jump in, but also we really do believe if it has a voice that can help right now and bring awareness and bring resources, we put all of that on our website, on our social media, then I'll jump in to do it.
There were some comments I saw popping up, and a lot of it had to do with being authentic, which I think is really important and something that all three of these ladies have in common. So there's nothing that seems oh, I'm just like you mentioned, like, oh, it's great if you're just jumping in October for breast cancer awareness. And I mean, I've been in press for over 10 years. Every time it's like, oh, who's the new designer that wants to get like a pink cup or a pink lipstick? Great. The charities will take your money. But if you, and going back to another comment I saw from Jen at Cause Marketing, she said, you know, it all goes back to your story. If your story is tight, if your messaging is tight, it's going to come across as authentic, which is what it should be. And that segues into the next question for Zabina. I feel like I should call you doctor. It's been a year of reinvention, and this year you launched In Kids Box, pivoting away from, well, not away from, but from your full-time medical practice. What resources did you use to amplify your new venture and increase awareness for your brand's mission? So did you go anywhere or seek any advice for anybody who's listening on how do I amplify what I've created?
Oh, yes, I did. So as you know, I'm a medical practitioner. I am a psychiatrist. I'm a child therapist. So when you know, going back to Nicole's thing, passion was driven by something internally with me, had nothing to do with medicine. And so when I got into this, I learned that I needed to get resources and figure out how to bring my business and my brand and my mission to the forefront. Because like I say to all my friends and family, they don't teach you business in medical school. They teach you medicine. And what happened was I used these resources that I started learning about. I learned there's social media, there's marketing, there's going to Pamela, who has Mom Hustle, who is a great friend of mine who sat with me and said, okay, let's go through this process. I learned that I'm not the best at everything. So I needed to bring in people who were good at stuff, who were good at creating a website for me, doing PR for me, or talking to me about PR, talking to me about how to speak and do communications. As a psychiatrist, you listen, you don't speak much. So I started looking at those things, and they're not wrong. We're not saying you need to invest in all this. There's so much advice out there through programs. I'm part of so many organizations that mentor me and show me what I need to do and what I need to use to bring this brand and this mission-driven business out to all the parents and all the children, so they know what we're trying to teach them.
So we actually just had a comment. Tell us a little bit more about the In Kids.
So In Kids, it helps teach children about a curiosity, about embracing differences and culture and beyond. We want to teach children to accept everyone as they are and treat everyone equally. So we're teaching diversity, acceptance, and we're teaching one country, one culture, and one tradition at a time. And we're doing that through our culture boxes and our cultural products. What we love about In Kids is I'm not the expert at certain countries. So I have parent ambassadors who work with me on every single box. And then we also have a nonprofit that we work with that we help children learn, that you give back to other children so they can further their education. We launched with our India box. We have our Turkey box that came out. And the one that I'm very, very proud of, with the Times Today, we launched our America box, which is our Black History edition, which I did with my sister-in-law, who is African-American, and we did it based off the fact of the Times Today to teach the children. So in February, we have Black History Month, and we decided, why wait till then? Why not educate them, bring their curiosity? The box is beyond education of what we learned in school. It's about working with parents. The coloring book that we have is with a mom from North Carolina. She's African-American. She created the coloring book. We have the book that is Skin Like Mine by Leticia Perry. She collaborated with us. We're going to put Hair Like Mine in the next set of our books. So it's teaching children about more than what you have to learn, about the people who were in our country who actually did something beyond our great leaders like Martin Luther King, Rosa Parks. It's teaching them about that education. So In Kids is about teaching culture, whether it's outside our country or inside our country.
And I have to say, so I actually got a box because I think we both belong to a group called Hey Mama. So I'm going to,
yes,
I will plug, because I believe in communities, whether it's Hustle Like a Mom or Hey Mama or Girl CEO or Cause Marketing. I believe in communities because that's where occasionally you'll also get free resources and growth. Right. When we connected through Hey Mama, and I think you sent me a box, it had to have been February, like right before all this, or January, before everything started. And I loved it. And it was the first thing I did for the first like 2 or 3 weeks is they got into the India box. I had to recommend everybody check it out. It actually, they learned, I think it was like 10 or 15 words in Hindu, which
in
I thought
Hindi. So every single one of boxes has a language card in it that we branded, that we bring 20 words, like we work with our ambassador parents. They teach us the dialectic language of the country, and we use those words, and then we put it in the dialect as well as in English. So parents can not only learn it themselves, but we can teach the children as well. So our India box has the Hindi language in this box. Our next India box actually is going to have the Punjabi language. And then our Turkish box has the Turkey language. And actually our America box for the Black history has all the people who have given back to our country, like who was the first person to make the stoplight, who was the first person to get the gold medal in the Olympics, who was a Black American. So each of those cards actually are like flashcards to teach our children as well. So I get really excited. And going back to Pamela's point, we literally launched 2 weeks before COVID. So if you could say anybody can do it, you can do it. You can put yourselves out there, you can make it, you can get connected with different nonprofits and bring forward a passion that you have and just put it out there. So anyone is possible. If I can do it, you can do it.
And I'll cap off that by saying, you know, a lot of it has to do with virtual networking, right? Because we're not meeting in person. I'm not hosting a Hustle Like a Mom event. I finally did a virtual one in August. I was like, if not now, then when? It was like, oh. So virtual networking, getting on Instagram or whatever's comfortable for you, getting into communities is really, really important. And I think not being afraid to ask questions. So if anybody's listening right now and wants to connect with any of these women, like, you know, the great doctor just said, if you can launch it in the beginning of COVID and still be alive making baby moves, awesome. Next question, Stacy. What practical lessons have you learned during COVID about what you, and you alluded to one of these already, what you and your business need versus what you thought you and your business need?
So, I started my business in the heart of, you know, the Garment Center in Union City, New Jersey, but my first office was my home. And then I built factories in Union City, New Jersey, and cutting tables and sewing rooms and the whole thing. And then over time, I started finding my factories in Pennsylvania and offshore and all over the world. But one thing about that, make sure you always have multiple resources, factories all over, because in a pandemic, you can't use certain factories. So I was able to survive with my Canadian factory and my American factory. But something that I think, you know, I started with no cell phone and like a computer on my back and like maybe I had a BlackBerry or maybe a flip phone. But so I did that and built my business. And so now with like our phones and, you know, you can do shipping labels and do Shopify on your phone. Like our website, like my sister helped me build and code, and like, it was just like, took many, many, many weeks before it even launched back in like 2004. So now we have all these incredible resources and you can do it from home. And my team, thankfully, we have a lot of people all over the world, and I had a few people from Jersey and Brooklyn in the actual office, and so we all were able to pivot and be remote. I'm able to be here, be present for my child. I was homeschooling from March to June with no help as well, and so I was working, you know, morning to night and fitting that in, and I was able to do it. I was definitely not as well feeling as I am right now, because I started taking care of myself. So the second thing is, you can work from home because there's a lot of resources. I don't know if that's for eternity, but my cutting room is not in my office in New York City anymore. So I was able to do samples remote and have it sent here. And then self-care, which is like, I have a podcast where I, you know, interviewed hundreds of women, all top CEOs, actors, singers, entrepreneurs like yourself, Pamela, you know, and everybody would come in and talk about how they take care of themselves, and I'd be sitting there interviewing them as like therapy for myself, but I wasn't taking care of myself. I wasn't going on runs. I wasn't doing, you know, yoga, Pilates. I wasn't fitting it into my day. And now, since this whole change of events, I'm like, you know what, now is the time. So I'm going on 1 mile runs, I'm fitting it in, and I feel so much better. And I'm doing Melissa Woodworth's health, I don't know, Pilates and yoga, and I'm fitting in like once a week, and then I get on my Zooms and I do all my work and help my child. So I think that like for my life, 20 years owning a business, almost 20 years owning a business, hustling and bustling around the Garment Center, meetings on meetings, traveling to Paris, London, Finland, wherever I was going, I sort of had this, you know, step back to when I started, and that I could do it in my home with incredible resources, make it happen, be a mother, and try to work out. So I hope that I am giving you inspiring tips for what you can do. But I do think if you're starting a new business, you really can do it right now from the home. And we all are in the same position, unless you're a doctor or, you know, someone on the ground floor. And so I'm very grateful I have the privilege to do this right now.
I think that you mentioned a few things, which was you relocated, right? I think you always thought you had to be in the office. Many of us did. You know, you think you have to physically be with your whole team, and nobody's saying that that's not wonderful. Look, I miss being able to physically have you know, a sample touch, you know, feeling with somebody in a room. But for an extended period of time, whether this is going to be a year or 2 years, we will probably be okay. And I also, you know, to your point, it's not 20 years ago. There are so many resources from, I mean, printing your, I mean, the simplest things like printing your label,
printing your phone, right?
Your labels, exactly. You know, I would love to know, like, what are the resources that we're using now that are making life easier? Like, for example, Canva. I mean, I'm not affiliated with any of this, but I make all of my graphics that you see on Hustle Like a Mom on Canva. Squarespace. I don't know if I'll ever hire a web designer again. I mean, I probably will, but you know what I mean? So there's ways to get economical now if we need to, and still, like everybody was saying, take these like little baby steps moving forward. If anybody has any resources that they'd like to add, otherwise we still have some juicy questions to get to. But okay, so we're talking about being mission driven. So being mission driven is great, but we all need to keep the lights on. So we need to fund the mission. What tips do you have for aspiring brands that want to embed more mission-driven initiatives while also keeping the lights on? So, you know, in order to give it away, you gotta make it. So are there any thoughts? Like, I know, Zabina, your business is new. So have you thought about, you know, what percentage we're giving? How is this going to make sense? Do we add more later? Do we start off giving away 25%? Do we start off with 5%? Because that's what's going to allow us to pay everybody, keep the lights on.
Yeah. So with our, you know, organizations that we're working with, we've had some amazing nonprofits. So with our India box, we're working with Team Seva. Team Seva is an organization here in the United States that actually works with smaller organizations in India to help build schools and further education in the villages. And what I love about Dave Dougal, who is the founder of it, he actually says to me all the time, give me $5 a month, give me $6 a month, give me $500. I don't care. That little amount will make me go further. And while you're furthering your business, I will help you further, you know, we'll help further other kids' education. So I like working with organizations that really understand our mission, as well as we're connecting on the same level. We did for our June with our turkey box, actually, it was interesting. I helped teachers in the inner schools here in LA get computers. So it was a little bit more than I could afford, but we had a vendor here who did use computers and helped teachers get computers within their homes that were like, they couldn't use their laptops anymore. So we worked with them. So I'm looking for different organizations and different people who would like to help us to further help education for other kids. So I think you can find organizations out there who you don't have to be like, okay, just give 25% or give 50% or give 15%. I think you can find a way around it. And that's what we're looking for our next organization with our America box, who's like, how do we work together to build your mission as well as to build ours? And that's what we're trying to do. Like, we're new, so I know Stacy probably has worked so much with doing. I was like, I figured she'd have ideas for me, but I think that's where I inspired from when I was looking at Stacy. I was like, okay, I want to keep my business and not, but I know I can find organizations who will work with me and build the business and build the mission. And that's what we've actually found. And it's been really great, especially in COVID. So I think everyone's looking for a little help.
I wanted to speak to that. I did, just because I've been here, I was able to do a lemonade stand with my son yesterday. They donated money to No Kid Hungry. And I actually woke up in the morning and said, oh no, I didn't post it anywhere. I didn't call like New York One, like I didn't do any press. My husband's crazy. Well, anyway, they made $100 and are giving $25 to No Kid Hungry. So
that's great.
I love what you're doing. I'm so excited to connect after this to help. And
absolutely,
this is what an amazing company you're building during this time. I think it's so essential. So
thank you.
That was really exciting. So next lemonade stand, you're all coming.
I like that you wanted to call New York One.
I will this lemonade stand.
But it's so funny.
Like 5-year-olds doing the lemonade stand. I'm like, why didn't I think of that?
This is like product of 10 to 15, 20 years in the business. Like my daughter will literally be like, why aren't you shooting this?
Right.
At a TV segment. She's now used to the last few months being my B-roll, like the behind the scenes. I need like somebody opening up a box, showing a foot, you know what I mean? And I have no models, so I am shamelessly indulgent. But yeah, so I think it's really good, and I think everybody's listening. We're all in some ways in the same boat, in the sense that we want to be a part of a mission, whether it's our own business that will be part of a mission, or we are the foundation, the charity that wants to be somehow connected to a business. I think you both of you ladies made a good point, and Nicole probably as well, where it's this idea of you have to work hand in hand and find an organization that's willing to meet you at whatever level you are. Because if your lights go out, they're not getting it, to your point, the $6, right? They're getting, as we say in New York, bupkas, $0.
There's also
yeah.
Just everyone here, in the beginning when I started working with Survivor Corps, they weren't a 501(c)(3). So they said, don't take the money, donate it to who you want to donate it to. So we donated in the beginning to Glam for Good. And also my partnership with Finnegan, they're Welligan, Maxwell and Finnegan, the parents of a Black boy and a white boy who came together, hugging together, that went viral. They did not want to take any money as well, the parents. So we're donating to Privilege to Progress. So there's sometimes when you're working with people, they might not want to, or they might not be a 501(c)(3) yet, and eventually they will want to be, so there's definitely different ways to work with people, which is pretty amazing. So props to Survivor Corps, who's on here, who is now receiving money from Boy Meets Girl. So.
Yes.
I want to add something to that, Pamela. It's interesting because for someone like me, who this whole aspect of bringing a cause to what I'm doing is new to me. So I love hearing from both Stacey and Zavita that, you can find partnerships, because the whole collecting of money thing, people don't even realize that part is major. Obviously, you can't just start saying, yeah, give me money for this and I'm going to help this one. And it's like, what are you talking about? Or some organizations who are not set up fiscally, tax-wise, to accept money will want you to sort of donate that money elsewhere, but still partnering with them on whatever your cause or mission is. So I love hearing that information. I think it's valuable to anybody who wants to start getting involved in that way and tying their business in with a cause. You don't have to have that full official setup to accept money yourself, or even partner with someone who is. It's about brainstorming and figuring out ways to help and make a difference.
Yeah, and I'll read the comment from Jen that, it doesn't always have to be about money up front. It's also about your work and your time and spreading awareness for a particular cause or platform. Excellent segue, I think, because we had a tremendous loss over the weekend collectively. I think we could all agree. This weekend we lost a hero of justice and a beacon of light for so many, none the least of which are women and moms. Ruth Bader Ginsburg said, fight for things that you care about, but do it in a way that will lead others to join you, which unfortunately we don't always see that these days. Do you agree? And how do you apply that to your own life and your own causes with respect to bringing people into the fold? And I already see Nicole, so I'll start with you.
Thank you. That statement as so much that she has said over her life and career, resonate, but that in particular is really, really impactful, because I think that, as we were just saying, if you don't have maybe an official organization set up, how do you take what you're doing and use it to fight for what you believe in, and also encourage others to do the same? So in my case, where I'm really trying to diversify what I consider to be the wellness palette, both the flavor palette and the color palette. So I want to see a lot more diversity in wellness messaging. I think it's dangerous to cherry pick who we want to give our wellness products and our health advice to. And that's kind of what happens in mainstream. A lot of it has been whitewashed for a very long time. And then we started to get a pushback where it's like, well, why does it feel like wellness is reserved for the wealthy? Okay, so we're tackling how to make it more affordable. But what we're still trying to catch up to is why is there so much pigeonhole and stereotyping? Why do we see a certain type of Black person all the time talking about food, for example? Why are we always pushing a certain food or a certain food profile and then calling that inclusion? It's like, you can't just say, health comes in all shapes and sizes, but only focus on one shape and size for specific colors. Like, that's very detrimental. And then turn around and blame certain cultures that they're not healthy and they don't take care of themselves. So it's very important that anyone who has a platform or who has a space to drive the message home, we have to do that. So, and we can do it without having sort of the structured, official, nonprofit setup. We can figure out ways, and we have to figure out ways to incorporate that into what we're doing. So I have made it my mission, and I feel like it's been my mission for a while, but like I said in the beginning, it's a lot easier now to come forward with it and say, this is my mission, as opposed to figuring out ways to organically work it in without making anyone uncomfortable. So now I can come out and say, hey, listen, I want to do a segment on how to slim down soul food. And nobody says, well, what are you talking about? How can soul food be slim? Now I say that, and it's like, okay, great, we like that idea. Let's look at the calendar. So it's really about making what you're passionate about become a part of your branding experience, of course, while sticking with authenticity. Because the one thing you don't want to feel like is like, you're jumping on the bandwagon. But even if you feel like you are, like I said before, it's better to jump on and figure it out as you go than never make that impact. So
yeah, I think that something that you've done and that I've noticed, and we've had chats about this both live and in private, which is this idea of when you educate, you do it in a way that doesn't necessarily alienate. And we do have in every area right now, every area, we have many moments where we're not necessarily doing what she says, which is, how do you lead people to join you, right? I always use the analogy, this is kind of the one that I always think of, in the 1980s when PETA would throw paint on people with fur. I was like, that's not going to get us anywhere. That's an example, whether you, right? Because that doesn't necessarily bring anybody into the fold. That gets them upset if they were the fur wearer. So the same question to all of you ladies, do you agree with this concept of how do we bring a cause forward while also bringing people into the fold with us? And if so, how do you feel you're doing that? Oh, I see Zabina.
Go ahead, Stacey.
Oh, sorry.
No, it's okay.
I mean, I think that's been the ethos of Boy Meets Girl, right? And what I've been doing. So speaking about anti-bullying, back in 2008, I started working with the National School Climate Center Bully Bus program before people were really talking about bullying in the cyber world and bringing that to the forefront. I went to Bloomingdale's and I said, let's do this with Sammy Hannerty, who was the actress of the Chris's Stand Strong doll. She's now 21, she was 12 then. And so anything that I am bringing to the forefront to talk about in our missions and cause related items, I feel that, again, our consumers learning, but if they want to be part of it, we're not preaching it, we're just sharing and we're explaining why this is important. And then I believe they follow. And so I've had this incredible group of youth activists that I've been working with since 2017, and they are all young youth activists who are coming from different spaces. One is she can't vote. She's a family of immigrants, and she's almost 21. But she's been in America since she was born, but she can't vote. So we worked with her for our human rights and our voting campaign to talk about this. We have the youngest youth activist who I was on a panel with last year, Luis Hernandez, who started Youth Over Guns, who's now the head of Gathering for Justice. And we have a youth activist who is for environmental, awareness. She was Miss New York. And then we have Tyra, who is in the shootings in Florida. And so she's really working on Black Lives Matter. And everybody comes from a different upbringing, a different setting, whether it's lower income, higher income, the Bronx, Upper East Side, Florida. So, but everybody it comes together as a community to want to help. And that is what I believe. If you're, like you said, not throwing pain at people, but you're sharing and talking and understanding where they come from, people will follow. And so, 3 years later, I'm working with all those youth activists. And when I pick up the phone and say, we're doing a voting campaign with this whole group of fashionistas who have started this with the CFDA and everybody else, and they're now hopping on board and they think it's cool, which is great. Will you come join Boy Meets Girl again and share the message of voting? They're like, yes, Stacey, we're there. We want to help out. And so I think that we just have to be, again, authentic in our voice and know what we're talking about and work with incredible people to bring the movements together. And the youth today are going to make this world a better place. So I'm really glad that I still work with very young people as I get older. So.
I'm just going to add on from that, because Stacey, that's exactly where I'm going. I'm going a little younger generation. I mean, what our goal is to educate children by culture, foster their empathy, their kindness. I mean, these are proven facts that, younger children between the ages of 19 months up to 6 years old, this is where we'll guide them. And I'm trying to bring in not only the kids, but their parents. So if we educate our children through us, we will develop these amazing, forums to come together, groups to come together. My goal is, as well as Stacey's, is to work with causes that will help us further foster these children in kindness and in empathy. And also, where do we start? And we see bullying in schools is at the age of 6 years old. We see 160,000 kids skipping school because they're scared of being, bullied, whether it's because of the skin or their culture or the food they bring to school. And it's bringing that into the younger children. So when we get to these youths that are, helping Stacey in these organizations, they're already not doing that. And that's the goal within kids is to start with that younger generation and these parents to bring these cultures together.
I think that really embodies what the late great Ruth Bader Ginsburg would have wanted of us. I think she would be very proud of us, all of us, both the men on board and the women who are pushing forward. And then I'm going to ask one last question, and if anybody, I guess, has any questions, you can pop them in the comments box, and Jen will probably bring them out to the fold. But the last question is also something that I think is often thrown at women is the fact that they're too emotional, even though we probably need a little bit of balance right now, given what we see in the world today. But interestingly enough, again, RBG has also stated that emotions, quote, zap energy and waste time. And I can attest to having grown up with women of the same background as Ruth Bader Ginsburg, like Russian, Yiddish, from Odessa, like she's from, like her family's from there, that's where my family's from. That's how they train us. Keep it inside, like, because it's a waste of your time. So how can we prevent anger? And this was specifically about anger, right? And like your emotions in that respect. How can we prevent anger from clouding our ability to be effective team builders for our families, our businesses, and our causes?
How do we have time to be angry right now?
Very good.
Yeah.
My answer.
That is right. That's basically it. There is no time for that.
Right?
No
You know, when
time.
she was writing her dissent, she would never get into, like, if you read anything that she's written, she would never get personal or emotional. She would get factual. And I think I think that's what she meant, which is this idea of anger zapping your energy and wasting time. This is how we bring people into the fold. This is how we grow our community. And if anybody has any questions, I think we have time for like one or two. But otherwise, if any of you ladies have any other comments for anybody who's listening, I know we have a very wide range. Oh, Jen is here. I'll let Jen take over.
I did have one. Thank you so much, all of you. Just amazing boss moms and really accessible and open and sharing with their expertise. So for that, I'm grateful. Just as colleagues going forward. So thank you so much for sharing and for doing all the work that you do. One of the questions that came in from Carrie Hayden Bully is, how do you handle anger and grief and fear in front of your children? I know this is something that I have, it's hard given this climate to not be reactionary, to not get extremely angry about what's happening, but how do we not shelter, but also but be mindful of how our reactions are shaping their reactions.
Can I take that one? Me? Can I do that one?
Of course.
Nobody has questions. So again, I actually come up from a very like a hardcore Soviet Union background where you do not show your cards on the table. And so I've used that a lot right now, which doesn't mean that they don't see my emotions, but I don't allow them to see excessive worry, because my worry is their worry. My anxiety is their anxiety. My joy is their joy. So I'm very, very mindful of being not like happy-go-lucky, but being, the big word around the house is resilient. How do we be resilient? How do we be persistent? I'm dealing with a 6 and a 7-year-old, and these are words that they know like the back of their hand. How do we be resilient? How do we be persistent? How are you going to be brave? And then this big phrase now that we use is warrior, not worrier. So we go, are you a warrior or a warrior? Warrior. It works like a charm with the 6 to 8-year-old crowd. Trust, okay? You just have to explain to them. And it makes you laugh in the process as adults. Guess what? They laugh like crazy. My daughter had a terrible experience with the virtual ballet class because we're the only family that's still doing, like, at least around here, like all virtual, like we're in the massive minority. And so she's the only one zooming into the ballet class. We tried it and she was crying hysterically. So I ended up being in her ballet class with her. It was great. And she still hated it. And you have to, and then at the end, I made her go through the whole class because that's just how we were taught. And I'm like, look, warrior or warrior, you didn't like it, you went through it, we'll figure it out for next Saturday. I have to figure something out. But I think that we have to be really, really careful that all of what we express, and we can do it just like this. This is an expression, you know what I mean? At the kitchen table, they get it. So I try to control it.
Can I just add on to that, if that's okay? What I would say is, as you know, with my background in therapy and this is that I'm a big advocate of showing your emotions to your children, but like Pamela said, to an extreme, you know, and letting them show their emotions. I have a 3 and a 4-year-old. So they're two different. I have a boy and a girl who are the opposite. I have a strong young girl growing up, and very similar to Pamela, we say, how strong are you? You know, and she likes to show her arms as well. And I love warrior versus worrier, but my husband and I are very like, we don't try not to say negativity. So we're like, is that a positive word? Is that a word that we use to express how good we feel and how are we feeling? So I let them show their emotions. I let myself show their emotions. But like Pamela also says, I do it in for myself a little bit of a less. But I want them to express themselves so we can talk about it and go through that process. Because there's a frustration. They want to get out. They want to go. We're in extreme quarantine for my family because we have underlying disorders and I take care of my family here. So there is a lot of frustration for them. And I want them to express it, even if it is going and playing in the mud today. All right, let's go do that. That's going to let go of something. Let's go do it. But yes, I do think letting them go through their emotions is very important.
I think it's interesting.
Sorry.
Oh, sorry.
No, you go, Stacey.
Well, let's talk together. No, you go. I was just going to say, Dylan, for the first time, asked 2 days ago, when will the virus be over? And he's been really resilient and he's been really brave. And it was like, I had this moment of like flashbacks to March being like, oh, it'll be like a month. And then, here we
Remember
are.
March?
or we're 2 years from now. So, his school got pushed back another week. We're in New York City. It's all remote this week. And I really, I can't answer him. And so instead I was like, you've been really great during this. It's a really hard time for everybody, for mommy, for daddy, for the world. And I hope that, in time, the virus will be over, but, you're still going to have to wear a mask to school when you actually enter all day, when that happens, hopefully next week. And so, I think right now it's just like, we're all trying to figure it out and hold our emotions in or let them out on a run. And how we speak to our children, like you said, Pamela, is, everything that comes through us, they know and they react and they feel. So I try to stay really zen, as you know, with me, and keep it here, but also educate in terms of what happened, even with, all the marches happening during George Floyd when he was killed. And so sort of explaining to him what's going on, but in a way that he can understand for his age, because he's sick. He's almost 6. So I'm trying to keep it light, but also educate. And that's why your boxes will be really great for him.
Zavina, I need some boxes too. I'll be ordering. My son is
definitely.
He's so, the idea of trying to like rein in my emotions, he's already like a mind reader. Like I'll just be sitting there thinking to myself, okay, so what are we gonna do today? This sucks. And he'll go, Mommy, don't be sad. And I'm like, but I didn't say I was sad. Why do you think I'm sad? And he just looks at me like, you know why. So I feel like the challenge is keeping it honest with them, because I don't want to lie to him. And sometimes I'm not sad, but I am kind of like, a little bit, I'm nostalgic for, at this time we would go to cooking class before, we do these different things. And I do feel that way. And I know he can sense it. So I feel like I'm trying very hard to balance giving him the right answer, especially when he calls me out on it or assumes I'm sad, versus not telling him more than he needs to know. Does that make sense?
No,
I feel like I'm
absolutely.
My son is like Yoda. I think that there's
he knows stuff.
In fact, he could have led this session, and it would have been really funny. So he says to me, because it's like 50,000 apps, we're doing the virtual only schooling. It's mildly better than before. I'm still going crazy. I did train, they're fine. I'm fairly certain that they logged in at 12:45. And if not, say la beep, it's fine, it's gonna be fine. I'm gonna log them in at 1 o'clock. But he says to me, because I was fiddling with 4 different apps and none of the programs were working. This was like the other day. And he comes over, he rubs my back and he says, it's my 6-year-old who just started 1st grade. He said, Mommy, don't be frustrated. I'm like, and they just, so, tip, children will bring you back to the moment.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
And you think you're concealing it, but they know.
By the way, much like, I mean, I'm not comparing children to animals, but much like, people who don't have kids or don't want kids, and I'm not advocating, I'm just either way, you have a pet. These are little bits. I'm going to just leave with some practical tip, whether it's a child or a pet or a phone call to somebody, we still need to be grounded in something like present in order to be effective leaders for ourselves, for our communities, for our causes. So whether it's your child or your dog or plant or a phone call to your grandmother, we need that. I think that what Stacey was saying before about wellness, it's not just me attempting to even do a 10-minute Melissa Woods workout, which happens like once a month these days. It is about connecting and being present and like, oh, I picked up, like any therapist that would say, right? I picked up my tea. I felt the tea go down my throat, right? And that 1 minute pause I had somebody tell me that a few months ago. Worked like a charm. You feel like go down and you're literally ready to
literally talk all day.
Does that work with coffee too?
So I'm going to say as a therapist, that's an old school mentality, but yes, it does sometimes work. I use it actually to this day. I'll pick up a cup of tea or just be mindful of a candle or a smell to say, okay, I need to come back to it. It's like my 3-year-old will tell me, Mom, calm down. I'm like, okay. I'm like, Zane, calm down. I'm like, okay. I think
Or there's this thing like whatever it is that you reach for on a regular basis. I know Jen is gonna like kick us off in 10 seconds. Whatever, but this is valuable. This is a valuable tip, okay, from a mom. Whatever you reach for on a regular basis. So for me, it's bounty. And when I reach for the bounty, I'm like, oh, I'm reaching for the bounty, and I remind myself for just that 30 seconds. It's like that Calm commercial when the blue thing goes and you're like, that's what 30 seconds feels like. So I reach for the bounty and I do that a lot. So every now and then I get like a 30-second like, me and the bounty. On.
It's the hand sanitizer. It's the mask. Right. Mom bags right now. It's bananas. But I really appreciate all of you. We will stay true to time and we will end at 1:30 and we will have Lisa start shortly. But I did want each of you or maybe several of you to share, because I know we have a lot of dads and partners on the phone thinking, how do I support this boss mom who's maybe taking on more, or this boss dad even who's maybe taking on more childcare responsibilities and doing more during this time? How do your partners kind of support you throughout this process? And maybe that can be helpful for some of the folks who are listening. How do they support the entrepreneurs or cause-minded folks, mission-driven people in their immediate family?
Nicole and I talked about this. Oh, look at this. Someone's going to come in here. I have a feeling there's going to be a kid coming. Coming. We're sharing the office space today, the home office space today. But I think that we've both become in the home, working in a New York City apartment, and sharing our spaces, and we've been really accommodating to each other's needs and our calls and our time, and which is really incredible because you haven't had that much time with your spouse in that many years like we do now. So I think the support of just saying you're doing a great job, because obviously I think in this situation we are the ones homeschooling versus the men. I don't know why that happens, but it does. And he's been very supportive of you're really good at this and you should really be doing this instead. No, just kidding.
New career.
But no, he's been very supportive, and we are definitely dealing with like how we navigate everything as a team, which could change. A lot of people are going the other way, and we have come together as a unit. So I'm very grateful for that.
I think that for all of us who, sorry.
No.
You go.
I'm just gonna say I don't think I could have even launched In Kids without Rakesh, because we launched right during the period of 2 weeks before COVID. My husband has been my backbone to this. Coming from a cultural background where leaving medicine and stopping for some time not to practice, my family looked at me and said, "Are you nuts?" And I was like, no, so do. He has really been my support with the kids, with the household, with his own business. He himself has his own business, and he, works from home. Sharing an office was a little difficult, so I kicked him out to mom and dad's next door, which was fine. But he's still been my backbone. Without him, I don't think I could have survived dealing with COVID, children, launching a business, and him also supporting us in every way possible. He has been actually, you say it, but he is my knight in shining armor. And he's proven it during COVID. So I don't think I knew that until I saw the virus come around. So that's my good thing about the virus, is that I noticed that about my husband. Yeah.
My husband, I asked him this question yesterday, because what are tips he has? And my husband, ever the practical one, he said, if you you know, especially if anybody who's launching something right now or wants to expand or change, your colleague right now is likely your spouse who's at home, most likely with you. And so for him, it's like, he's like, let me take over all of your accounting and bookkeeping. And there were some other things he's taken over. And he's like, so good, now you don't have to spend the X thousands of dollars that you were spending on that. I'm going to take that over. So if you have a tech expert, whatever, right, that's like your free asset. You've earned it. You know, whatever, if he's good at something, then that could be an asset to you, especially now, because that's somebody who's physically there to like go over things with you. So, you know, turn to your partner and do-si-do and like literally be like, what have you done for me lately? Sing that song at 9 o'clock when nobody's listening. And maybe, you know, they'll say, oh, you know what, you know what, no, I don't know anything about fashion, but I can help you with your legal side. Hello, Brian, Stacey's husband.
Right, yeah.
Thank you so much for sharing. One, I know I could talk to you ladies for a whole day and a half, but I'm just really thrilled that you were able to join us. I don't know if you want to close out, Pamela, or if you want to.
I was going to sing or do a sermon, either way. Some people actually asked about this. Yes, this was on purpose. Yes, I do have a bunch of, I always had. I'll close out in a few things. One, thanking Jen for giving us the opportunity to speak. Thank you for all the amazing comments. I know many of you are listening are parents, some of you are not parents. I think much of what we talk about is applicable to anybody. If you're an entrepreneur and you're a hustler, it doesn't matter if you're a mom, that just adds a little bit of a wrench in the equation these days, but it's nothing that a mom can't handle. You know, I think we have a lot going on politically. Like, I'm literally looking at my feed right now. Please vote. Please honor the legacy of Ruth Bader Ginsburg. She's done a lot for us. And so we need to continue and do a lot for her, because that is watching. That's all I have to say. She's watching us.
I really appreciate all you've done. And thank you. Yeah, we all get a little choked up when we talk about her. So I appreciate all of you, and keep doing what you're doing, and hang in there. I am too. Thank you. Really excited to bring up our next guest. Her name is Lisa Burke, and one thing that people have been struggling with is obviously employee engagement and morale right now is at an all-time low, and so we've brought on culture coach Lisa Burke. You met her early today. Lisa, if you'd like to share your screen, please feel free.
Yes.
I think we have given you co-host abilities. So Lisa works to help rate the top workplaces. So all the workplaces come to Energage. They want to be rated. They want to be the top workplaces. So she's really an expert at
profits. That these are some of the challenges that they have. Their communication up and down to employees and to leaders, as well as innovation, are things that they tend to struggle with. I also, in working with many nonprofits, I find that sometimes nonprofits over-rely on the mission, meaning that they get employees in the door because, hey, we're, have this great mission. And then they say, but we can't pay you really well because, hey, we have a great mission. So they almost over-rely on that meaningfulness piece. So watching for the balance in that is important. Now, pre-pandemic and during, what we found is that for nonprofits, they improved on most of the survey statements. The biggest improvements were that meetings make good use of my time. We're finding that even more than at other industries, these Zoom calls or whatever seem to really be working, or we're thinking about like, okay, could I have this meeting basically over email, or do we need to be face-to-face? That employees are feeling more well-informed about important decisions. So as we know, this is the year of the perpetual pivot, and we'll probably have to pivot again before the end of the year. When you share with employees what's going on, then they feel more well-informed. Their loyalty or intent to stay at an organization, that one doesn't surprise me as much, just because in these uncertain times, If you weren't a bartender before, you know, and you didn't have another job, if you're in a job that's pretty stable, you're probably not necessarily looking for another job. Execution, doing things efficiently and well. So that has worked in our favor, and cooperating with other teams. Overall engagement had been at about 53%. By the way, the national average, not of top workplaces, but of average organizations, is around 31 to 35%, which is kind of a sad statistic. You know, if you're able to go to a drive-through and grab a cup of coffee, 2/3 of those employees are thinking about a better job or working someplace else. That engagement improved to almost 59.3%. So that's a 5% improvement, which is significant. Now, compared to other industries, although there was an outperforming on that meetings statement, nonprofits underperformed on perceptions around my pay is, you know, average for this industry, that the benefits were good, that they would refer friends to working there. And actually, even though that was a high engagement, it's 1.5% lower than at other industries. So what does that mean? It means that employee engagement is more important than ever. And when we correlated all of those statements to engagement, the 4 statements that kind of rose to the top, and this is where I'll give you some tips on how to improve employee engagement. The statement around feeling genuinely appreciated is the most highly correlated for nonprofits. So in other words, it's not, and that's not just about having an espresso machine in the break room. That is about someone genuinely saying, hey, good job. So we need to make sure we're doing more of that, that people feel they can work at their full potential, that they believe that the direction the organization's going in, and that those leaders are clued in. So we'll start with appreciation. There's a Harvard Business Review study that basically says when people in organizations feel appreciated, connected, and competent, they are better able to innovate, iterate, and create. Why do we need innovation, iteration, and creation? More than ever during a pandemic, when it's like, oh gosh, we can't go back to the office. How are we going to do this? We did a great job pretty much in March and April figuring out how to do that. And again, since it's probably going to need more pivoting, these are the skills that we need people to show up with. Appreciation is a habit. Not showing appreciation is also a habit. So why do you want to bother? The business impact. It's a low cost, high impact return. The statement typically is highly correlated to engagement across industries, so it can improve engagement. And you know, kindergarten teachers and all the world's religions agree that gratitude is actually both receiving and giving is a really important part of well-being. So how do we do it well? Here's some tips. Be sincere. Obviously, authenticity comes through and people can read it on our faces, even over Zoom. Be seen. Use video, good lighting, and I want you to use nonverbal cues as well as the words you're choosing. And what does that look like? That looks like leaning forward, because when you lean forward, you look like you're more engaged. So being seen is important. Smile. Be kind. Try to meet people where they are and ask about the human first before talking about a task. And that's just a really simple thing to do. Be a leader. I want you to upskill the golden rule to the platinum rule, which is treating people the way they want to be treated. So if you're thinking that you want to appreciate someone and maybe they've done like a really stellar job and you don't know how to appreciate them, ask them. Say, hey, you did a great job. I would love to offer you some appreciation. What would mean the most to you? Like, I would love to, write a note, or if it makes more sense, I'd love to get you a Starbucks gift card. What would mean more to you? It might be a moment of an uncomfortable conversation, but then you know that whatever you're doing is going to be even more effective. And then, of course, be positive. Reinforce what people do. Positive psychology, strengths amplification. So talking about the things that they do well and want even more of that. So what are some ways to go after this appreciation? So starting with individuals and teams before the company. So before you're talking about the entire organization, I want you to focus more on the individual achievement and people supporting each other. So like kind of calling out those examples. There will be time to talk about the company impact, but no one's really listening until they know kind of more about their personal safety at the job, that everybody's wearing masks or whatever it is the guidelines are. Honor those lost. So as we know, we've talked about how pretty much kind of everybody probably knows of someone who's gone through the COVID experience. And our first speaker talked about, and they don't want to be kind of forgotten that they went through that. So if there is a way that you can, and I'm not talking about just those that passed away, but anybody who's gone through a difficult experience, kind of honoring that. And it's okay to talk about that. We've talked a few times about the power of story. Collect success stories. So especially those that talk about the company values. So how people have lived the company values, especially during the challenges of the pandemic. My guess is you've already done some of that, but even more. And then learning for the future. So this has been a difficult time in this crisis. I would suggest asking now for people kind of what lessons have you learned, so that should another crisis come along, you'll be even more well prepared. And then create channels for good. So whether it's a Slack channel or, some sort of virtual bulletin board where you can basically kind of call each other out for doing a good job. If you are going to give money, make sure you're giving money for a purpose. I know I'm preaching to the choir here, but there have been companies who have given allowances for making work at home an easier thing. And they give $100 to get a chair or a monitor or whatever else might be helpful, or $50 for exercise equipment. So make sure you're giving it for a purpose. And maybe create a buddy system. There's an organization I worked with, had 450 employees. They put everybody's name in a hat and just assigned buddies, because basically we kind of put the burden on managers to make sure that they're checking in with their employees. But if you create this buddy system, and that includes everybody from the top to the front line, so that they can check in with each other, because we're often missing that interaction nowadays. That can be really helpful. What to watch for? Know your audience. So if you are going to appreciate someone, and I was going to call Jen Ritchie out and say, Jen, you did a great job at the Cause Marketing Summit, but Jen doesn't like the spotlight, that actually might make her feel more uncomfortable. So get a sense of how, again, that person might want to be appreciated. Consider your tone and timing. So stopping appreciation because it sounds too happy during a stressful time. Nope. Definitely even more. People are looking for that. A reinforcement that, first of all, they're secure in their job and that they're doing a good job. All employees want to feel successful in their role. So reinforcing that is helpful. Make it a culture fit. Make sure it's not just some cookie cutter appreciation recognition system that came with your HRIS system, or that, someone else tried at their company, but they're a law firm and you're, a nonprofit. That might not land as well. So make sure whatever you're doing to appreciate is a culture fit. And then manager burnout is probably one of the biggest concerns. So businesses, organizations have pretty much put the burden of making sure employees have everything they need and are doing well and are being accountable on the shoulders of managers, who also have to do a job. So that's been a difficult thing. Make sure that you're checking in with your frontline supervisors and managers, that they have all the tools that they need and that they've got an effective work-life balance. So we talked about appreciation. Now let's talk about potential. And that statement is that the organization enables me to work at my full potential. Typically, employees from an average workplace would answer that statement at about 56% positive. Top workplaces, we find that about 77% positive. And the top 10% of top workplaces, if you want to know what the high bar is about 90% positive. So why does it matter? 90% of millennials value opportunities to grow and develop their careers, yet fewer than 40% believe they had learned something new in the past 30 days. So how do we help make that connection around you are able to work at your full potential? First of all, make sure that managers are engaging in one-on-one conversations. I know I just said watch for manager burnout, but this is an appropriate place. Make sure that they're having conversations with the employee about what they see as possible for themselves in terms of potential, and anything that you might offer as a manager and say, wow, you have great organizational skills. I could see you excelling at project management. Is that anything that interests you? If not, how about I have you shadow or jump on the next project so you can learn a bit more about it? So they often need a coach, your management people, to kind of push them in that direction. And this dovetails into challenging employees, giving them those tasks and projects, which is where they can learn and kind of figure out what they want to do. In terms of clear career paths, this unfortunately is a very common downfall for organizations, that they don't have clear career paths. And especially the pandemic's kind of, blown that up a little bit. There were a lot of organizations that didn't have interns this year. And without interns, there aren't the kind of newcomers. And that career path thing is like, well, I don't know how that would work if we're doing it all virtually. You got to make sure that people understand what's possible for them. They want to learn and grow and develop in an organization. So as much as you can make that clear, please do. And then make sure that it is an organizational value that is lived from the top down about supporting continuous learning and individual development plans. And make sure you get rid of any red tape that might prevent an employee from being effective. What to watch for? Employees who don't have opportunities to work outside their typical day-to-day roles, which can make them feel kind of stifled. So watching, making sure you're having conversations with those that are a little more blinders on kind of jobs. They may enjoy what they're doing. I would suggest, in fact, that the steady eddies of the world kind of help run businesses. That's fine. But if you don't ask the question, you don't know. And please don't assume that you know the answers. Also, watch for employees who've given up, who had good ideas and they didn't hear anything about that new idea being enacted or a reason why it wasn't going to be. And so they kind of feel like they've been banging their heads against the wall and they've given up. So watch for those white flags and make sure that you encourage them and keep them engaged in the organization. The third statement was around going in the right direction. Again, you can see the percentages there. Why does direction matter? Well, it's about the chosen path of the organization, including how it has pivoted during the pandemic. Industry experts have said that the first 5 weeks of how a company handled the pandemic will likely impact the brand for the next 5 years. What do I mean by that? Well, you've got people who are, when we become robust organizations again that are going to be hiring in droves, one of the questions you can expect from new employees is, so how did you guys handle the pandemic? Did you have any, layoffs or furloughs, or how did you communicate with employees? How did you set them up to win? So those are going to be important things to know that you can tell a good story to the employees, prospective employees. Coming back to the power of story again, tell stories and use examples of the company's direction in action. So this is different from your mission, vision, and values. This is what direction basically are we going in now? And that is something that likely has pivoted for everybody during the pandemic. So talk about how actually we did this new thing, and here's a story about how it really worked for our clients. Make sure the direction's visible, because it isn't necessarily always communicated perfectly well from the top down. So if you have an in-person office, making sure the direction's like on a poster or something. But you can also use it as your background on a Zoom call or on the signature lines of your emails. So making sure that that direction is reinforced. Manage reinforcing that with your teams, having the managers do that, and then checking in with senior leaders to make sure that all the actions that are occurring are still being aligned with the direction they'd suggested. Watch for, I see Jen's face, which means I don't have much time left. So I'm going to whip through these last few slides. Is that
Sure.
okay, Jen? All right, cool.
A minute or two, and then
okay.
we can take a question.
Perfect. So watch for a lack of direction, leaders who haven't communicated about it well, or when communication falls apart. Typically that happens between senior leaders and managers. And then clued in leaders is employee want to know if they're heard, and if a leader doesn't give that feedback that they're hearing them, it's a miss. So make sure leaders are practicing active listening, having an open door policy, which can be virtual, making sure that they're asking for what the employees are saying during meetings, and doing skip level meetings, which I don't know that there's tons of organizations here with big hierarchies, but having people who report to the person who reports to you, having meetings with them and kind of checking in with them, and making sure that not the loudest employee always wins, that the leader isn't defensive, that they somehow are closing the loop on the message. And this one is the one I really want you to remember. Listen to repeat, not solve. That's hard because anybody who's manages other people is always looking for, I want to be efficient and solve their problems. Listen to what someone's saying so that you can repeat it verbatim. Then you're knowing that you're really hearing what they said. All right, I'm done.
That was wonderful. I really appreciate the insights. I think one question we did get asked that you may have mentioned and you may have mentioned have there been any unexpected findings that you've discovered throughout all this?
Yeah, so again, one of the things across all industries that we kind of were surprised by when we looked at companies who'd surveyed with us in 2020 prior to the pandemic and then during the pandemic is that engagement scores went up. We kind of expected that it might be this is something, change creates fear in humans, and humans tend to react, with a more like, I'm going to step away from this. But I think that what it forced was more leaders having conversations with employees saying, we don't know what's happening next. This is what we know, the actions we're taking. So I think there's been more frequent communication, and the fact that those scores increased was a surprise.
That's really amazing. And I think when we had chatted, you had given some examples that people had been using, or tools they had been using to help engage their employees. I think you had mentioned CEOs reading bedtime stories.
Yeah, exactly.
Any examples of like remote virtual engagement that might be helpful? That would be great if you could share.
Yeah, so there's an organization in the Philadelphia area, thousands of employees, called Power Home Remodeling, and they had to furlough more than 1,000 employees. And when they did, they maintained like talent shows every week, or every week they kind of did something different. So it was a way for people who obviously weren't seeing each other and weren't necessarily making money, but they still wanted to stay connected. And so the organization would host that. I also work with the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, and they also had to furlough some employees. They sent out a weekly playlist. So
yeah, little things that you can do to keep people engaged. Well, thank you so much, Lisa.
Thanks for having me.
Important thing for us all to consider as we embark on these mission-driven causes, to make sure that our own staff is feeling engaged and heard, and that feedback loop is being closed. So thank you so much, Lisa. I appreciate your...
My pleasure. Thank you.
All right. So, and to all of you for showing up today. I was a little nervous about how interactive this could be, because it was really important for me to host a conference that really felt like the community that we have been building. And I can see from all your faces that it is. And I'm really touched. So thank you for showing up. So in the words of the late, great Ruth Bader Ginsburg, Justice Ginsburg, if you want to be a true professional, you will do something outside of yourself, something to repair the tears in your community, something to make life a little bit better for people less fortunate than you. That's what I think a meaningful life is, living not for oneself, but for one's community. And so I really appreciate this community and this tribe and how you really showed up and you continue to show up. So thank you, and I'm gonna sign off and end this meeting for everyone. All of you have a great, wonderful rest of your day and hang in there. Appreciate you.